Oh boy.
Yes.
I don't think, I think we might actually. Welcome to a special edition of Cheddar, everyone. John and I are here at the Digitas NewFront.
It's great to be here, and for those who don't know what a NewFront is, we
Yes.
have the perfect man to describe it, a man who needs no introduction, or I guess we will give him an introduction. Scott Donadan from Digitas LBI. Scott, thank you so much for being here today. This is your 11th NewFront, right?
It is Digitas' 11th NewFront, yes.
Not yours.
It's my 4th.
Right, because you were in diapers for the first few. Tell us what a NewFront is, what we're doing here today, and you know what this means for the company, what it means for the industry.
Sure. When we started the NewFronts 11 years ago, basically the idea was we were telling our clients, you're not paying enough attention to digital. There's a lot going on there. You're investing all your money in television without even understanding what's going on in digital. We're obviously past that point now because of the growth in digital over that last decade. Now it's more about content and how you have to pay more attention to what's going on with content and storytelling, particularly as the intrusive, interruptive advertising model continues to decline.
The theme of the NewFront this year is boycott. Explain what that means and why you decided to go with that theme.
Yeah, we always try to be provocative, not for the sake of being provocative, but to spark debate on the things that we think matter for our clients. And I think this year we feel like there's so much social, cultural, political upheaval going on, and it really is impacting what brands do. We're seeing more brands as activists, and it's impacting the stories they tell because they're beginning to express their values. And it's no longer enough to just say, hey, 2 pizzas, $9.99. It's really companies like REI and Dick's Sporting Goods and Burger King and many others that are beginning to stand for something, at a time when they have to.
We'll speak to senior executives from REI in a moment about their marketing, and actually Twitter executives as well. Their marketing campaign has been around social activism as well. But when you say controversial, I was privileged to participate last year in your NewFront. It was controversial then. It was the caveman versus the spaceman, and we talked a lot about kind of caveman impulses, cavewoman impulses in consuming media. But this is a different level. I mean, this is really, meaty social issues as opposed to just a controversial point of view on advertising.
It's funny. I would say up until even 6 months ago, we were still in a world where most brands wanted to avoid controversy. They wanted to stay neutral. They wanted to step out of the debates. That's not an option anymore. So I think it's how do you take a smart, strategic, authentic approach to expressing your values, because the brands that try to sit on the sidelines right now are actually being dragged into these debates whether they want to be or not.
Interesting. So pushing brands to take what would be risks for them, something they might not be used to doing, but also how important is deals here and making sure that there is a business flow coming in?
I think this is all about business at the end of the day, and usually at the NewFronts we've talked about issues around content strategies or how technologies like AR and VR and AI are transforming content. This year we decided to talk about the content of the content itself, because that does matter, because the only way that brands can really reach people at a time when they can skip past all of your advertising is to tell stories that are worthy of their time. And I think what we're saying now is you can't really tell stories worthy of people's time unless you care about the things your audience cares about.
Scott, when you say boycott, one of the things that actually occurs to my mind is sort of boycott buying on Facebook, boycott buying on YouTube, until the issues around moderation, content appropriateness, avoiding political interference are resolved. Is that kind of a double entendre a bit of the meaning of the boycott slogan for the NewFront this year?
I don't think it was directly for us, but you're not the only one who's drawn that connection. So I think it's all part of a world where all of these things are being looked at and questioned, and there are options on how to deal with them when people don't get the answers
and
they want.
you are a media agency, and the conversations with the client around Facebook, I mean, more so than almost any other, maybe YouTube to some extent, it must be nonstop now, right?
There's a lot of interest. There's a lot of questions, and I think, yeah, it's our job to help kind of give them points of view and help move the ball forward.
Are there brands that you think are doing a good job of boycotting or working to take more risks in their own message?
I think some of the brands we talked about, like REI and what they did with Opt Outside, I think Burger King and the short films they've made about issues like bullying and net neutrality have been fabulous. I love Dick's Sporting Goods because, sometimes brands will do things, but they'll almost couch it in some other terms. They'll try to, well, we were going to do that anyway.
Yep.
Whereas Dick's came right out and said, you know what, this kid, we sold him a gun, and it wasn't the gun he used in the shootings, but it could have been. And we have to make sure that doesn't happen, and we have to be as brave as the Parkland students are being. So I think we're seeing brands get really bold and open about the stances they're taking.
Scott, we'll have to wrap there. We have a very tight schedule because we've been lucky to have so many great guests here today. Thank you for having us in this great spot here at the Digitas NewFront, and we'll check back in with you later in the day.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. Back to you guys. I guess, Kristen, where are they? The New York Stock Exchange?
I think we're going to take a break, and then we're going to have another guest.
All right, back to you guys shortly then.
Welcome back, everyone. Well, John and I are here at the Digitas NewFront in Manhattan, and we're happy to be joined now by our next guest, Pam Wasserstein. She's the CEO of New York Media. Pam, thanks for joining us.
Thanks. I'm happy to be here.
Here this afternoon to moderate a panel about the Time's Up movement and the importance that media companies play, right, in telling some of these stories. What's the message that you want to get across there?
Media companies and brands, really. So it's a conversation about how the creative community can kind of step up in their efforts around representation and how brands can start to participate in this big cultural moment.
And when I think about the two most, I struggle for the right word, social activism type moves you guys made or political big things New York Magazine did in the past year or so, I think about the excerpting of Fire and Fury, which I told you how impressed I was when I ran into you on the subway a few months ago. And then the cover of all the Bill Cosby victims, right?
Yeah.
Walk us through your thought process in doing those two things. Was each of them an easy decision? Because you were sort of on the side of the angels and doing both of those things. Did you have any trepidation or concern around lawsuits and the like?
Well, in terms of lawsuits, we are very, very careful on the legal side, obviously. We have great counsel. We run anything potentially controversial through them, of course. The Cosby cover was interesting because that was summer of 2015. It was this image that really resonated with a lot of people, black and white. If you're not familiar with it, we had 35, I believe, of the accusers, Bill Cosby, and then an empty chair at the end, sort of representing everyone else. And there was a Twitter hashtag at that time, like around the empty chair, and how it sort of represented all of us and all victims. And those stories, I think we felt. And at that time, it was before Me Too had gained, Me Too existed, but it was before it became the Me Too moment that we're living now. But those stories were important. And no, I think everyone was really, really proud. And we knew that it would be kind of a major moment. We had video. It was difficult to put together, too, actually. We devoted a lot of resource and time to getting all those women
Putting
together.
pieces together. Certainly a cultural touchstone and one that was heavily consumed, right, in the media. Of course, part of this is about today here at Digitas at the NewFront is about deals and about branding and about opportunities going forward. And so did you find in doing some of these stories that you did over the past year, was it good for business or was it bad for business?
It's a good question. We find some clients really want to stay away from anything that might be considered controversial, forgetting political, but even just comment on a social issue. And, we have very, brand safe, unquestionably brand safe parts of what we do where those people, where those brands are very comfortable working with us. What we're finding now in the past year or so, especially around The Cut, which is our women's site that's been talking for years about power and not only sexual harassment and assault, but also power and sort of larger gender equity issues, is a lot of brands now feel that not commenting and opting out of the cultural conversation is an active choice. There's no such thing as neutral anymore. And so they work with us to be kind of sensitively navigate a really complicated social situation.
Pam, thank you for joining us. I apologize for the interview being so short. Doug is wrapping us now very aggressively. So we will have you back for a longer interview as we always do at the New York Stock Exchange. So thank you so much for joining us. We look forward to your panel this afternoon.
Perfect, thank you.
We're going to take a break and we'll be right back. Okay, we're back at the Digitas NewFront. We're so lucky to be joined now by Nola Weinstein, who's the Global Head of Culture Engagement and Experiential Marketing for Twitter. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
I'm so happy to have you here for this interview because I was just thinking last night when I was seeing another initiative you're doing around the Here We Are initiative, which I'll let you explain in a moment, how vocal and active Twitter has been in this social activism movement, especially around this movement within the movement. Can you tell us what Here We Are is and how it came about? I know that your CMO, Leslie Berlin, was heavily involved in it as well.
Of course, so thank you.
Yeah.
Here We Are is about ensuring women in every industry and around the world are seen and heard. Over the past 6 months, there's been a 50% increase in volume of conversation around women's rights and equality. So going into CES, we were shocked when we saw that their keynote stage was powered by 6 men, all worthy and qualified, but where were the women? In reaction to a volume of conversation happening on Twitter, hey, where's the women? What's up with this? Our CMO, Leslie Berlin, stepped forward and said, hey, we're going to build a stage of our own. We brought together 6 leaders in tech, different backgrounds, to deliver their story and their advice. We broadcast it live on Twitter, assumed tech enthusiasts might tune in, and to date, that broadcast has over 6 million views.
Wow. Here we are, never again, Me Too, Time's Up, Black Lives Matter, so many of these cultural movements, right, emanating and in ways starting on Twitter. And so how much of a push is that for the company to try to get more of those, right, in the new year? I mean, it's amazing to see the stock alone is up triple digits in just the past year.
So many of the movements of our time have started with a single tweet. If you think about movements like Me Too, Time's Up, Black Lives Matter, March for Our Lives, it's not just about marching with your feet, it's also marching with your tweets.
And it's also marching with your involvement in the movement. So in other words, you know, Scott was talking about earlier about how the brands want to be involved and activism is something that they're no longer afraid around. Do you find that on the platform as well too, that the brands are saying, how do we get involved with Here We Are?
Absolutely. You know, 65% of consumers are now buying on the basis of their beliefs. Brands have a right to step in and stand for something, and not just to stand for it, but to be willing to step in, to step up and to lead change and drive change forward. And just Monday at our NewFronts, we announced a slate of 4 content partnerships under the Here We Are umbrella that really shine a spotlight on women who have influenced the past, shaped the present, and the ones propelling us forward.
So really it sounds like capitalizing and focusing, doubling down on some of these movements that have really gained a lot of traction for Twitter of late.
So I so apologize again. This is like the speed show today. We will have you back for a longer, more detailed interview at the Stock Exchange of the Flatiron Building. Nola, thank you so much for joining us. Back to you.
Thank you.
All right, we're back at the Digitas NewFront, which is all about brands involved in social activism. We're joined now by Sarah Crockett, Divisional VP at REI, the outdoor and nature and sports company. And Sarah, you guys have had two movements as part of your brand that have been really exciting over the past year. You will not be open on Black Friday. You will be doing opt outside when the stores are closed. Is that right?
We want everybody to be doing opt outside. Yes,
so go right ahead. Tell us
absolutely.
about it.
Yeah, opt outside was something that was born 3 years ago. As we were looking forward to the holiday season, it seemed like everything that was happening in the marketplace was aimed in the complete opposite direction of our values, and that is that time outside is the best way to live your life. And so we shut 142 of our retail doors. We weren't fulfilling orders on our website that day, and we gave 12,000 of our employees the day off, and that was really the intent.
How successful has that been for the company, garnering attention about the company?
It's been an amazing, astonishing success. We've seen it grow and grow year over year. We've done it for 3 years now. Last year we had over 8 million opt-outside moments.
Wow. I just looked at your other movement, which is Force of Nature. I read the letter on your site about all the different initiatives. This is about women not having a lot of outside role models, equal representation, equal opportunities in the media and in the public sphere around outside engagement. Is that right?
Yeah, you know, we took a look at the outdoors and looked at ourselves and looked at a lot of different other industries as well and saw women were underrepresented. And there's a tremendous amount of amazing women killing it out there. And so Force of Nature was about declaring the outdoors as the world's largest level playing field and trying to encourage change across the industry as well as change in our customers' behavior.
Have you witnessed that this causes people to interact more with REI that are already customers, existing customers, or has it successfully brought on new customers as well?
Yes and yes. I think we're getting a lot of appreciation from our customers just for having this conversation. I think they're seeing that we're looking to leverage REI as a platform where we're bringing our employees and our customers and our members to the table to move change.
Well, Sarah, we look forward to your talk later today. Thank you so much for joining us. I should mention there's a $500,000 fund available to people that want to submit for ideas to push Force of Nature forward. Is that right?
We had 29 grant recipients this past year where we donated $1 million in grants to some amazing groups that are already making great progress in this space.
All right, we'll leave it there. Sarah, thank you so much for joining us. Come back soon. We'll take a break and we'll be right back.
Okay.
Digitas NewFront, joined now by Michael Kahn, Global Brand President of Digitas, also goes by MK. It's good to see you.
Exactly. Nice to see you. Nice to be here.
Happy to have you. Biggest takeaway that you want people to leave with here today?
That I think brands now have to start to take a stand or be conscious of the reasons if they don't take a stand on the different issues that are kind of overwhelming and transcending society right now.
Do you find that brands that you've worked with are hesitant to do that?
I think that there's always been cause-related marketing in our industry, and it used to be institutionalized on a campaign basis. Now, because of content being live and real and 24/7, I think brands are having to think about it daily and moment by moment. And I think they're being faced with a post-net neutrality world where everyone has to take a stand. So I think they're all thinking consciously now about, I can't just institutionalize this, I have to activate it and live.
MK, it's fitting that you're batting cleanup today.
Yeah.
Because we talked all today about what today is about, but your bio, I want to quote, it says, when he's not driving performance across the globe, Michael is relaxing with his wife and 3 daughters.
Yes.
You were at Performix, which
Yes.
is a very ROI, results-driven agency.
Yeah.
How does this stuff that we're talking about today, how does it generate ROI and measurable results, and how do you measure it?
It's a great question. So, came from a performance agency, rooted in, again, results with every investment that we made. I now come into an agency that combines science, art, and performance together. The truth is, in this day and age, is that you can't expect to get the consumer to move unless you have a relationship with them. You've made a connection with them. Part of what we do in an agency, and I think all agencies have to do, is think about the audience they're serving, think about ways to connect with them through paid, owned, and earned involvement, if you will, in exchanges, and add value to that equation. So now, building a relationship leads to revenue, not just driving to a call to action.
How much more involvement do you need to see? I mean, taking a stand on some of these social issues that we've seen, it seems like practically every week, unfortunately, in some regard, there is a new social element, right,
Yeah.
in the mix of everything. And so what kind of involvement, commitment does that take? A new one, a different one?
I think it takes one of being always on, monitoring the marketplace, being very conscious of what's happening with consumer and consumer mindset, being in a kind of war room mentality where you are, again, actively involved with dialogue with your clients on what's happening out there, and then having the levers and systems in place to move on that.
Michael, MK, how do you stop this from being a kind of thing that they'll do 1 or 2 days a year, or they'll do sporadically, and then they'll go back to their kind of bottom of the barrel DR advertising, and they say, we'll do this because we want to look good, but instead we're just going to spam a bunch of display ads the rest of the year?
I think we are now in such a different world with digital communications and channels and always being on that people can't afford to sit on the sidelines anymore. I think we're at a tipping point, and that's part of this NewFront today and the topics that Digitas has sponsored and we'll talk about. Where now all of a sudden cause-related issues management is a daily moment-by-moment occurrence because the news is out there every moment of the day. So I don't think brands can go back to consciously sitting on the bench anymore. They're going to have to make this part of their brand marketing plan.
All right, well, we'll have to leave it there. Kristen, any concluding thoughts to sing us out today?
You know, I think the performance aspect is really interesting, and just, you know, what is a realistic, tangible performance goal this day and age, of course, with the changing social movements, and speaking to the boycott theme, I think is fascinating. So we'll have to continue the conversation off camera.
All right, well, look, that was live from the Digitas NewFront here today. We thank MK, we thank Scott Donaton, we thank all of our guests today as well, and we're done.
Hi guys, I'm Darren Strauss. I am one of the producers for the NewFront, and you are literally minutes away from watching 2018's Digitas NewFront. We are so excited. I have here with me the creative brains behind this event. We're going to talk through all the inspiration behind what you're about to see. But first, let's go through and meet everybody. Let's start with you.
Hi, I'm Yum Chang, Associate Creative Director at Digitas.
Hi, I'm Michelle Pergal. I'm an art director at Digitas.
Hi, I'm Dana Ferruzzi, Senior Art Director.
I don't actually work at Digitas, I'm just here. I'm Dave Roth, Creative Director.
So, Dave, I'm going to start with you. There's a lot of thinking that goes behind trying to figure out what the theme is every year, and this year is a very provocative theme. Can you explain what that theme is and maybe talk us through the thinking behind it?
Sure. Yeah, so this year, you know, I think you kind of have to be living under a rock to not be aware of, there's a lot of turmoil out there. There's, you know, MAGA and Resist, and there's Me Too, and there are a lot of things happening, and there's a lot of upheaval. And what we wanted to do was you know, a lot of times traditionally brands like to remain neutral. They like to sort of stay out of it, and that's not necessarily an option. We've seen from people destroying coffee makers to kneeling during the anthem. Sometimes even if you intend as a brand to stay out of it, you can't. And we thought we really wanted to kind of attack that head on and really dig into what it means and what the steps are for our brand moving forward. And how it came to be, it's actually funny because we started with a completely different theme. That was
which is normal.
Yeah, which is normal. I mean, that's nothing unusual. But we started with something, you know, very different, and it was actually it was Scott Donaldson who kind of was like, "Hey, let's talk about sort of what's going on here."
Yeah.
And we were like, "Yeah," and you know, I'll let other people speak in just a second. But the idea of, you know, why we call it the Boycott NewFront. You know, on one hand, it's a succinct way of talking about sort of the, you know, there's a lot of social feelings out there, and we wanted to get into that. But also we wanted to be provocative. And, you know, one of the most frightening things you can be if you're managing a brand is to see your name after boycott. And we definitely wanted to hit that head on.
Yeah. And there's a really, really awesome logo that you guys came up with. And can you talk us through who created it and what was the thought behind it?
Yeah, I can talk about it a little bit. Yeah, so we decided to use that logo with the hand holding a cell phone.
Yeah.
Because most of the time, people nowadays, that's the medium, the powerful medium where people are using it to protest as much as they can and create those movements. And that little device is the one that actually causing all these amazing changes in the world. And we wanted to portray that energy and that energy, creativity, energy of protest, dispute, reaction, friction, everything into one single style of graphic.
It's really cool too for when the show starts, you'll see it on the stage. There are these two screens on the side that are kind of sideways cell phones with hands on it.
I thought we said no spoilers.
We spoiled it, but you'll get to see it and you'll love it and it'll be awesome. But it was a really cool concept, and even the invites that went out to everybody kind of had a similar feel to it as well. And so who was involved in thinking through that? Was that everybody here?
Yeah, I think it was definitely a group effort. I know I had created.
In short, it was Dana.
Yeah, I created the initial logo and the hand lockup, and I was kind of thinking about this play between traditional protest, boycott-y sort of screen printed posters and new technology and everyone having a phone and tweeting and just that iconic hand for protest, but what that might look like in 2018. So because everyone is so divided, we kind of took that theme head on and with the two screens on the side of the stage, so it's back and forth throughout the show.
One of the things that you guys do every year, because I've worked with you a lot, is you always try to make the event feel very experiential. And you always do something really cool when people walk in. Everybody that's watching this live stream is not going to be there, so you're not going to feel the cool experiential things that they do. So I wonder if you can talk me through, I don't know if Dave or who wants to talk through the experience when people walk into the venue and what was your thought process behind that?
Yeah, so sort of playing on the whole notion of dichotomy and everything, you know, we wanted to create basically a clear division between brand neutrality and brand activism is the way we call it. And, you know, this sort of the desire to just everything is fine, everything is calm, we're going to stay out of it. And, you know, brands, as we're going to see in this event, that are really doing some very interesting things and very intelligently being a part of the conversation. So when people walk in, they're walking into the land of brand neutrality, and we have Sarah McLachlan playing, and, you know, Michael Bolton and all stuff like that, and we have mannequins dressed in 1950s style with signs like "I have no opinion on that, neither do I," and we're sort of having some fun with the blandness of neutrality in 2018.
Yeah, and then when people walk into the venue, it's like all colorful and crazy and vibrant, and that's where you see that like awesome hand thing that you're gonna see. And then after they come out, things change, right?
Yes, so we go from the land of brand neutrality to brand activism. So, you know, we, yeah, you guys aren't gonna get to see it, but the mannequins get a nice little makeover, and they're a little more punk, and they're definitely part of it. And we have, you know, fun drinks. Like, you know, Not My Mojito. I don't think that's actually the name of it, but it's something like that.
You did come up with cool names there. I don't remember what they are, but they're really fun.
But yeah, and better music, and we have a lot of fun pieces. Not to rub it in for anybody who's not there. But yes, the coming out is a lot more fun than going in, very intentionally.
So how many years, going around in a circle, have you guys worked on NewFronts? I think you're the longest, so you get to go first.
Yeah, I think
Which year NewFront?
I think this is my 6th NewFront.
Okay.
I have to check the math. It's been a little while.
You forgot.
What about you?
My first one.
First one. What about
Also
you?
my first one.
First one.
Yeah, first one too.
Oh,
Yeah.
You can see, yeah, people really like working with me.
Yeah, we love Dave.
Now, one out of all the creative assets that you created for this event, going around, name your favorite.
The posters.
Posters.
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
why?
It just has a lot of energy.
Cool.
It just says everything there.
Awesome.
I think the drop-down banner, which will be revealed at some point during the show, that was really fun. It was kind of like a big summary of a lot of the posters and graphics that we did. So
Cool.
Probably the logo.
Yeah.
That's fun.
Oh, my favorite creative asset is this.
This video is like quality stuff. We're doing a really fun thing at the beginning of the program. Do you want to tease anything, or should people just stick around and watch it? Because it's gonna be really fun.
We said no spoilers.
Yeah.
So with that said, no spoilers. The show is about to begin. It's a really fun show. We have W. Kamau Bell. We have the president of the New York Times and Jodi Kantor, who just won a Pulitzer Prize. We have founders of Time's Up. We have Philip Picardi, who it runs Teen Vogue. It's going to be a great event. You're going to love it. I hope you enjoy it. And congratulations to you guys for an incredible creative strategy for this year's event.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the host of the Emmy Award-winning CNN original series, United Shades of America, W. Kamau Bell.
Hello. Hi, how you doing? I don't normally wear microphones like this. I feel like I'm giving a TED Talk. My name is W. Kamau Bell. As you heard, I am the host of CNN's United Shades of America. Just started season 3 last weekend. Yeah, thank you. I am contractually obligated to say that. Thank you, and welcome to Boycott NewFront, everybody. Look at this. Let's try it again. Welcome to Boycott NewFront, everybody. Look at this. Yes, I'm happy to be here. As I said, I'm the host of CNN's United Shades of America. I'm also a stand-up comedian. I'm also a dad, not necessarily in that order. We have some pictures from the show to show you what we do if you don't know what we do. That's where we were in the dark. There we go. Oh, there I am. That's me at a cross burning. So in the show United Shades of America, I think I was invited because what I do in the show is I travel around the country and talk to people about their lives and also go places where either you wouldn't expect a black man to go or you absolutely think I shouldn't go, like a cross burning. People ask me, well, this was the first episode of the show ever. This was the pilot. This was the thing that sold the entire show. And so when I was told we were going to do a pilot, I believe you go big or go home. So they were like, you can go any place you want to. I said, I would like to talk to the Ku Klux Klan. People ask me, why do you want to talk to the Ku Klux Klan? And I honestly, just to see if I could do it. That was the answer, just to see if I could do it. All my life, I was told to stay away from the Klan, don't look at the Klan, don't go to the Klan, don't hang out in the Klan, don't go to the fraternities that say Kappa, 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 don't do any of that. But when I had this opportunity to go meet, to go do something, I was like, you know what, maybe this show won't sell, maybe it'll never air, but I at least want a story. And so I went, and we went to go meet with the Klan, and we sold the show, and then the show started airing. So at the first season of the show, it was all about like pushing myself to do things that I wouldn't expect myself to do. We went to San Quentin Prison, went to Camden, New Jersey to talk about community policing. And this show, this was in 2016 during Barack Obama's last year in office. And then the second season, things changed a little bit. And the message of the show got clearer. I say the first season was like the mixtape, the second season was like the album. For those of you who know what that means. You're all hip and cool. And so for me, it was very clear that like we need to really go to the people whose voices aren't being heard and highlight them and hand the microphone over to them. And part of that, because I'm from the Bay Area, I live in the Bay Area, Oakland, California. Yes, home of the Black Panthers, home of Black Lives Matter, where Colin Kaepernick first took a knee in the Bay Area in San Francisco. So all this stuff up here I relate to a lot. I'm not sure they'd all be happy about it, but we'll keep that moving. But the idea is that I come from a place that is filled with activists and organizing. And so I said, well, this season we have to get the activists in the show. So it's not enough to go talk to Native Americans about what it's like to live in their community. Let's talk to the activists and organizers about what we can do to change this. So that was the second season. We went to Standing Rock, talked to activists and organizers in Standing Rock, and then talked to people who live there. And then the third season came. And it was like, well, what are we doing this season? And this is the thing I think that we're here talking about Boycott NewFront and what we're talking about. I feel like it's time for action. It's not enough to just tell the stories. It's not enough to just show the stories. We actually have to move people into action. People ask me like, well, what is the thought process behind the show? What do you want people to do as a comedian? What do you want people to take out of this? And I work in a lot of anti-racism work, anti-homophobia work, anti-transphobia work, anti-Islamophobia. I'm trying to combat all the things. And people ask, well, what do you want to do? And I realized I boiled it down to just do better. We all just got to do better. If you're not taking a side, you've taken a side. We got to do better. And the thing about do better, it's not political. It doesn't choose a party. It's just about we all have to do better. And in this room are a lot of people who have a lot of power and a lot of influence. And it's one thing just to make your thing and put your thing out there, but it's another to say, how can we make this thing make the world better? We all get to define what better is. We all get to define who we want to do better for. But I feel like that's the mission of my life right now. It's the mission of the show. It's the mission of my stand-up comedy. It's the mission of the 3 daughters I'm raising. We got to do better. So all I want you to do from this moment I'm talking right now is just think about that as you see people come up here today and talk about what they're representing, what they're working on. How can I help this person do better? How can I extend this cause forward? How can I get #woke and get the other people #woke, whatever #woke means to you? How can we do better? Thank you, everybody.
Kamal, thank you. That was fabulous. Should mention as well, not only did the third season just start on last Sunday on CNN,
Yes.
but the second season, you won an Emmy.
Yeah, we did win an Emmy, yeah.
So I think the message is resonating. As you mentioned, there was one president when you started the show. There's another president now, and you talked a little about how it's changed it. One of the things for me is it feels like the show is becoming a little less about what divides us than what bridges us. Is that?
Yeah, I mean, we were famously, in the first season, I met with the Ku Klux Klan. The second season, I sat down with Richard Spencer. And this season, we went to this show, I was like, I don't want to talk to obvious enemies. I don't want to talk to people who, I don't want people to think that's all I can do. So this season, it was like, let's just talk to people who need to be heard and need the microphone in front of them. And so the season premiere this year was about the U.S.-Mexico border, about the wall and all those things. And for me, it was like there wasn't any obvious enemy in that show. And I was really happy to find out that that was our highest rated season debut ever of the 3 seasons we've done the show. That means I don't have to chase down the enemies. I can just highlight the stories that people need to be heard.
Now, we were talking a little bit backstage that you've taped the shows for third season already, but the world is changing so quickly right now. Do you have any concern that some of those shows could even be would have looked dramatically different if they were filmed?
I mean, at some point you have to just sort of like a Vegas dealer, just clap your hands and step away. But also, I'm like sitting here going, do we have any Kanye references we need to take out? So there is this thing where you just kind of go, at some point you have to let it go, and at some point you have to take the slings and arrows for the things you didn't do and hope that you've earned enough loyalty with the audience that they will forgive you when things aren't perfect.
So when you talked earlier about the actions, not words, and I know you had talked about that even in regards to a Starbucks, for example, right? Closing the stores is one thing. It's what happens after. Is that same message both for kind of the corporate world and for your viewers? Is that what you hope your viewers take away from the show?
Yeah, because I find that the corporate world and my viewers all live in the world.
Shocker.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't really want to see, I don't see the separation between the audience and the advertisers and the brands and CNN. You know what I mean? Like for me, as a dude who lives in Oakland, who then got a job at CNN, a lot of people are like, how do you do that? How do you, like, how are you bridging that gap? I'm still working with people, you know? And as long as I can take myself into all those situations and not change myself for them, but also try to make myself affect those situations, I'll be all right.
I know you're a ways away from it, but if you had any thoughts or guesses on what a season 4 might look like, knowing the evolution of the show so far, any sense of where you see it going or want it to go?
I mean, I think that we want to get more specific. I think the first few seasons of the show, they're really broad topics like Muslims. But I think the more we go on, the more hyper-specific we can be and talk about really specific issues and not just religions or political movements.
Awesome. Thanks for coming today.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it.
And now, please welcome your host, who may look familiar, the Global Chief Content Officer of Digitas, Scott Donato.
Thank you. Hi, it's me again. Welcome. Welcome to the 11th annual Digitas NewFront. Really happy to be here today. But you know, brands have been doing some weird things lately. A fast food chain had one of its workers smash his fist into freshly made burgers before serving them to paying customers. On a day when a lot of people needed to get to popular destinations, a leading ride-sharing service decided to let them all ride for free. A retail chain sold exactly nothing on the biggest shopping day of the year and then bragged about it. A clothing manufacturer sued the President of the United States and ran ads calling him a thief and a liar. 2 different media companies found it necessary to spend millions of dollars reminding us that facts matter and that a banana is a banana, even if you call it an apple. But on reflection, maybe those actions weren't really all that weird. Maybe they represent the leading edge of a new reality, one that will transform the kinds of actions brands take and the stories that they tell. So what does all of this have to do with content marketing? Absolutely everything. You see, usually when we talk about content, we talk about things like audits and strategies, formats and channels and platforms. We examine how data inspires and informs our decisions and how new technologies like AR and VR and AI are transforming the way stories are shaped and shared. What we maybe don't talk about enough is the content of that content. You know, the actual stories that we are choosing to tell and the voices that we're choosing to tell them. Today we're going to do just that. You see, there's an elephant in the room, and he's got his own hashtag. We know that brand stories need to be authentic, relevant, topical, and timely. They have to reflect the world around them. But with apologies to Shakespeare, there's the rub. Because we're living through a time of incredible social, political, and cultural upheaval. Objective truth is under assault. Sexism, racism, harassment, and discrimination are being confronted. The country is more divided than ever. The president trails controversy wherever he goes. Throw in wars, refugee crises, terrorism, nationalism, Me Too, Time's Up, Never Again, Take a Knee, March for Our Lives. But I'll let you in on a little secret. Most brands don't like controversy. They don't like to pick sides for risk of offending somebody. They don't like messy situations outside of their control. And there's a real tension and conflict there. Is it possible for a brand to be relevant in today's world without taking a stand? Or do bolder times require bolder brands? There are risks in standing for something, but we've seen recently that there are risks in standing still as well. Some of the biggest controversies of the last year have involved brands that were just minding their own business when someone decided to, say, throw their Keurig coffee maker off a balcony, or spend their Sunday binge-watching Nailed It on Netflix instead of tuning into the Giants game. Giants lost, by the way. Brands have become accidental activists, except, of course, for the ones who are doing it on purpose. I'm thinking here of some of the brands I mentioned at the outset, which were, in order, Burger King, which ran short films showing how they tested the patience of their paying customers in order to get people to care about topics such as bullying and net neutrality. Lyft, which offered free rides across the U.S. to anyone attending one of the March for Our Lives gun control rallies. REI, which encouraged people maybe not to leave the Thanksgiving family dinner and step over each other in the Walmart parking lot, but instead to go for a hike with their family on Black Friday. Patagonia, which sued President Trump earlier this year over the shrinking of the Bear Ears National Monument and other public lands. And of course, the New York Times and CNN, which introduced marketing campaigns supporting what is now apparently the controversial notion that there is such a thing as objective truth and that it matters. This level of brand activism is a relatively new phenomenon. A year ago, a 4A survey found that 60% of consumers disliked it when brands got political. And as recently as the Super Bowl, Ad Age declared that most of the big brands that ran ads during the game played it safe, noting, quote, brands were largely disinclined to make any kind of a statement other than everyone is a special snowflake. But shortly thereafter, Adweek declared that corporations were shedding their reservations about stepping up on the soapbox, overcoming their fears about bad PR, stock price hits, and alienating consumers. In overwhelming numbers, Adweek wrote, America's largest and most influential brands have made their positions clear on a range of socio-political issues, sometimes brutally so. And despite the risks, there are rewards as well. The New York Times, in a story on what it called CEO activism, noted that consumers said they were more likely to buy Apple products after Tim Cook's statement opposing Indiana's religious freedom bill. Sprout Social followed with a survey that contradicted that 4A survey from last year. This time they found that 2 out of 3 people felt it was somewhat or very important for brands to pick sides in the culture wars. Neutrality, it seems, is no longer an option.
Boo!
Dave?
Don't Dave me. Brands should be neutral. Brand neutrality now. Brand neutrality now. Brand neutrality now.
Wow. Wait, hold on. Are you saying that brands can't take a stand?
Yes, they can. Brands take a stand. Yes, they can. Brands
What is going on here?
Brand neutrality now. Brand
This is
neutrality
crazy.
now. Brand neutrality now.
What is going on
Brand
here?
neutrality now. Brand neutrality
All right,
now.
enough. Okay, things are tense, I get it. But there's good news. We have something to show you that nobody in this room can get upset about. Does that sound okay? All right, then let's show it to you. Roll it.
At Digitas, we believe great content is a choice. So instead of why, we choose to ask, why not? We choose to speak with people, not at them. We choose to inspire, not deflate. We choose to elevate love, not hate. We choose to celebrate the brave, not the bullies. Great content is a choice. Won't you make it with us?
Okay, see, wasn't that nice? Now our next speaker, no, what? Really? It turns out the least offensive video in the world. Some of you were offended by it. Really? All right, I'm just being told we have a new cut. Let's play the new cut.
At Digitas, we believe great content is a choice. So instead of why, we choose to ask, why not? We choose to speak with people, not at them. We choose to celebrate the brave. Ah, how about those puppies? Puppies, babies, puppies. Great content is a choice. Won't you make it with us?
No. No way. Really? Still too offensive. All right, this is the last time I'm doing this for you people. Roll it.
At Digitas, we know great content offends nobody. So instead of taking a stand, we just show pretty pictures, like this. And make empty statements like, friendship is the only true currency. And wait, what? People are still getting offended? Seriously? Okay. You want a video that literally offends nobody? Here.
So it turns out it's really hard to figure out how to offend nobody, which should make the rest of today pretty interesting. Following the presidential election, the news business found itself in a pretty precarious position. It had to sell itself while being attacked by a trending, hostile, often relentless hashtag called fake news. The New York Times responded to the fake news boycott by spending the past 18 months reminding people that objective truth matters in a series of campaigns and ads. And then at the end of 2017, the New York Times broke the Harvey Weinstein story, which, as we know, is leading to change in pretty much every industry out there. I'm honored to welcome to our stage today Mark Thompson, President and CEO of the New York Times Company, who has been instrumental in the Times' digital transformation, leading the New York Times to become the first news organization in the world to pass the 1 million digital-only subscription mark. I'm also excited to welcome the New York Times investigative reporter Jodi Kantor, who, along with her fellow New York Times reporter Megan Twohey and Ronan Farrow of The New Yorker, just won a Pulitzer Prize for their sweeping investigations into Harvey Weinstein and others. Please welcome Mark and Jodi.
Use the fuse without fuse. I refuse to blow a fuse. They even had it on the news.
Hi there, Mark.
Don't believe the hype.
Thanks for coming today.
Pleasure.
Fantastic to have you here. So back in 2005, I think it was, a philosopher named Harry Frankfurt wrote an essay called On Bullshit, followed by another called On Truth.
Yeah.
In On Bullshit, he basically argued that bullshit was more dangerous than a lie because a lie respects the existence of truth by opposing it, whereas bullshit just comes out of nowhere. So going back to the election of 2016, Mark, did you actually think
We've got a bit of both. We've got a bit of both, I think. Really.
Do you think there would come a point where the New York Times would actually have to remind people that truth existed and mattered?
There was a moment in the summer of 16 where Jodi's boss, my colleague and friend Dean Baquet, used the word lie of one of the candidates, Donald Trump, on on the home screen and front page in the New York Times. That's definitely a moment. I mean, it's the Times had kind of assumed that you didn't have to call it out that way. And I think one of the things we saw was that fact-checking, which once had been a kind of piece of duty in paragraph 9 or 12 or whatever, had to go into headlines. The president falsely claims that, or claims without evidence that. And the other weird thing that happened was the direct and rather brilliant real-time interaction with this particular president, who's now tweeted specifically about the New York Times more than 200 times. Not always positively either.
Right. So what was the moment where you actually thought, hey, we're going to enlist people like Darren Aronofsky and tell our own story and remind people?
Well, actually, it happened literally within about a week of the election. And I thought, I mean, the president-elect came out fighting very strongly, specifically against us. Rather bizarrely, then came around to lunch with us. But he came out very strongly. There was a lot of defense out there. The Times has got many passionate friends and supporters, and there's a lot of defense of us. And the whole battle over this phrase fake news, who owns the phrase fake news, and do you call me a perpetrator of fake news, or do I call you? And all of that was, and it was rather brilliantly and adroitly turned by the president to be a way of labeling actually serious journalism fake news. So I by early December after the election had thought, you know, we better get out there and tell our story and explain what we want to do in our own words. And I kind of rang up the marketing department, a guy called David Rubin, and said, you know, if I gave you $10 million, what could you do? And the truth is hard was what came back. It's a brilliant campaign.
Fantastic. So Jody, first of all, congratulations on the Pulitzer.
Thank you.
It's a week old at this point. An Emmy, a Pulitzer, I'm not sure what I'm doing wrong here. As a journalist, what did it feel like as the fake news thing started to kind of grow, as you saw a lot of hostility towards the media in certain environments? Did it make the job feel different than it had before?
I felt a sense of overwhelming responsibility and anxiety, and I thought a lot about how to be equal to the moment. In the months before we started on the Harvey Weinstein story, we started about a year ago, in late April of 2017. I remember thinking, I have this precious seat at the New York Times investigative desk. I have the money and time that so few journalists in this country have to do deep investigation. And what am I going to work on? Because there are so many problems. It's actually overwhelming right now to decide what to focus on. And also my fear after the election is, what will have impact? I mean, between the fake news problem and also the feeling that so much is wrong, that it's hard to even be outraged anymore because we see so much in society that doesn't work. How am I going to pick the thing that people will actually care about?
Right. So how did you pick the thing?
Well, through really the Times' deep commitment to investigative reporting, what happened is that I know it seems like the Bill O'Reilly sexual harassment story was a lot of sexual harassment stories ago, but it was really a key one because Emily Steele and Mike Schmidt, they spent 8 months working on that story from August of 2016 to April of 2017. And that story really ended up being seminal in a lot of ways. First of all, because they were able to come up with a kind of new model of sexual harassment reporting where we used the settlements that the person had paid to women as a kind of legal and financial trail, as evidence of, you know, wow, these allegations have been accumulating for many, many years. And second of all, because of the impact, the idea that the top-rated host in cable news could lose his job because of these allegations, it was actually shocking. at the time. And so that is when Dean Baquet and the other editors said we have to make an even bigger commitment to this kind of reporting. And so lots of reporters fanned out in lots of different fields to do this story. My story was the Harvey Weinstein story, but my colleagues were working on Ford workers at factory plants. They were working on what was going on in Silicon Valley with women entrepreneurs, et cetera, et cetera. So I would say in a lot of ways the kind of seeds of the journalism that led to the Me Too movement, the editors and reporters were planting those as far back as last April.
Fascinating. Yeah, and right now cheerleaders.
Cheerleaders, right? Which I think those are really important stories because as cheerleaders go, so go the nation.
Right.
I mean, if the cheerleaders are getting upset now, it's really significant.
So you mentioned this, and obviously, your reporting and the reporting of others helped kick off the Me Too movement. We've got a number of the founding partners of founders of the Time's Up movement here today, and others. Were you surprised that this moment had become such a tipping point? When you wrote these stories, you knew they might have the impact they did, but there's so much of a sense with a lot of these stories that we kind of knew this and nobody was talking about it. What is it that you think made it such a moment?
We've been staggered every single day. So much has happened that it's almost hard to process even for professional information processors. I think one thing that's really important in looking at the roots of all of this is that we don't take a partisan approach. And part of the power of our reporting was that it was on the left and on the right. It was Bill O'Reilly and it was Harvey Weinstein. And it was, it was factories, it was Silicon Valley, it was all these different fields. So what we were able to do is establish this greater pattern and say, this is everywhere. This is not just about one industry. And these women are so different, these movie stars on the one hand and these restaurant workers in another, and yet they all say such similar things. And obviously the culture had been leading up to this for a long time. I mean, we just saw the Cosby verdict last week, and women had been talking about Cosby since, I think, 2006. And nothing had happened. But we saw with that and with Ailes and with the concern over the president's comments during the presidential campaign, more and more concern had been building over time.
Right. Now, Mark, obviously the New York Times is, if any journalistic organization has stood for editorial integrity over 170 years, it's the New York Times. But any concerns as things like the Harvey Weinstein story started breaking? I mean, clearly that studio must have been a large advertiser for the New York Times over the years, as are some of these other companies we're talking about.
What's interesting is we're so far from that. I mean, I was well aware that the story was happening. There's no way, in God's good earth, we're ever going to stand in the way of reporting what needs to be reported. And I want to say, and this is true in the aftermath. I mean, it's an incredible story. We got a fantastic photograph of Jodie and the rest of the team, mainly women, gathered around a terminal as they press publish. We knew it was going to be pretty big. It's like 100 times bigger, 1,000 times bigger than we thought. But this is a moment where our colleagues inside the building are watching us, our customers are watching us, and doing the right thing and being held to account for doing the right thing, I think for all of us, but also for all of our advertisers and all of our brands, matters more now than ever. It's like the stakes are very high, and you can't rely on the public reacting today the way they would have done a year ago. I mean, in a weird way, the Trump elections are different. I mean, many people think it's completely... But big surprises, really big surprises, are happening every day now. So I think the business of doing stuff that you can kind of morally get behind and feel comfortable seems to matter more now than ever.
Right. Now, I was a journalist for most of my career and big believer in objective journalism, but there are people who, a lot of my English friends in particular, who will swear there was never such a thing, because journalism is practiced by humans, and humans bring themselves to everything they do. How much do you feel, and I'd love you both to answer this, because Jodie, you were saying there's so much wrong right now, so much you could focus on. How do you kind of balance almost maybe a need and a responsibility to be more activist as a media brand versus the need to obviously maintain objectivity?
I'll let Jodie answer this properly, but I just want to say, I don't think we want to be activists. We want to be objective reporters. We've got opinion papers, but in our reporting, we want to be just straightforward reporters. Thank you. And we want skeptical readers. We want readers to question us. We want readers who don't just read the Times, but read other news sources and are questioning and thoughtful about what they read. What's interesting, though, is the hunger to try and understand what's happening in our rather confusing, frightening world is greater than it's ever been.
I think we can affect so much more change with facts and unbiased reporting than we personally could with activism. If we had run like a little italicized thing at the end of the first Harvey Weinstein article saying, rise up against, sexual harassment across the land, I feel like that would have diminished the message in some way, because our goal is to report the truth, and by the way, also to be fair to the accused, which is very important. And if you're an activist, people won't trust that you're being fair to the accused. And to put the information out there for the public to decide what to do with. And in this case, that was such a dramatic example, because what we really experienced with the Me Too moment was our reporting and working so hard and under so much pressure to document those allegations over the summer. And then when we published, the fact that women all over the world stood up and said, you got that right. I experienced that either with Harvey Weinstein or with another man, or when I was in high school, or my mother told me a story like that. That was so much more effective and powerful for them to say, this echoes my own experience and you got the facts right, than for us to be seen as pushing some sort of message.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much. Thanks for coming. Mark and Jody, please join me in welcoming. Thanks a lot. Thank you. So as a major retail brand, we mentioned earlier, REI made a big statement and a bold statement when it decided to close the doors of every one of its stores on the biggest shopping day of the year, Black Friday, letting their 12,000 plus employees have a paid day off and encouraging their consumers not to shop, to opt outside instead. That was just the beginning of REI's commitment to taking public stands on issues that clearly reflect its values as a company. To discuss the thinking behind those bold moves and others, please welcome REI's Sarah Crockett in an interview moderated by Spark Foundry's Chief Content Officer, Eric Levin.
Hi. Well, thank you for being here. Obviously, we're thrilled to have you, and Scott kind of spoiled my first question, but let's just get right to it. So Opt Outside, everybody's familiar. We talked a little bit about it, the movement that it created, how big of a deal it was. But I think what we get asked often, as I'm sure you do as well, is what was the genesis? Where did that come from? It is such a big deal. So if you could share sort of how it even started, I think that'd be great.
Well, I'll start by saying we're absolutely a purpose-led brand. We give 70 cents of every dollar that we make back to the outdoor community. So when we were looking ahead in 2015 to the holiday season and seeing the frenzy that happens around Black Friday, it just seemed like everything was pointed in the complete opposite direction of our values. And we know that living a life outdoors is the best life that you can absolutely live. So we took a stand and we closed 142 of our retail stores, all of our stores at the time. We didn't fulfill orders on our website on Black Friday, and we encouraged all 12,000 of our employees who got that day off to spend that time in the outdoors with their friends and their family. And we encouraged everybody else to do the same. And what we saw, thank you. Yeah. Thank you. And what we saw was just tremendous. And we've now been doing it for 3 years, just last year in its third year. Every single year we're surprised by the results. We saw over 8 million opt-outside moments. So what that tells us is that our customers and our members have really embraced this as their own mission, which is just phenomenal.
Was there ever a point when somebody said, wow, what the fuck are we doing?
Just like that. I think It was a bold move. There's no doubt behind that. So I'm sure those moments came before, but the second that we went live and saw how incredibly passionate and our employees in particular were about this decision, it just let us know that we were on the right path.
That's great. And like you said, it's taken on a life of its own. It's something you're sticking with year over year, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
But we know you talk about that a lot. You've done a lot more. We've been lucky to work with you on a number of programs. And just this past summer, you worked on something that tackled inequality in what you referred to as the world's largest level playing field with a program called Force of Nature. Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about the same type of thing, right? That was a big, bold statement to make. You put all efforts behind that as a company, but I'm not sure if everybody here truly grasps just how big of a deal it is.
Yeah, so Force of Nature launched last May, and it was actually the result of multiple years of work, research that we were doing, looking at the outdoor industry and other industries at large, and realizing that women had a chance to be represented in a much, much more equitable way. So we absolutely declared the outdoors as the place to be the largest level playing field. It has no bias, it casts no judgment, and so it genuinely is that. And so Force of Nature, beyond just making that declaration, was also about doing a total brand takeover. So every single piece of content and image that left REI was women's only or women's led. So that was our way of literally changing the face of the outdoors, which we saw as a big need. In addition to that, we built over 2,700 different outdoor experiences and programs just for women and girls. And we donated $1 million to 29 different grant recipients who were doing this amazing work on their own. We wanted to add fuel to that fire. And we're continuing to push into this. It's not a conversation that will ever end for us, similar to Opt Outside.
So do you have plans to continue it? Do you know what that looks like just yet, or are those still in development?
They're actively happening as we're speaking right now. And one thing that we see as a big opportunity for us is to just, within our four walls, look at our assortment. Do we have the right gear and products to serve our Force of Nature customers? Do we have everything that they need to enjoy the outdoors just as easily as everybody else? So that's a big priority for us to continue to push forward, but there's a lot of other things that are in the works too.
Can you talk a little bit about the customer consumer feedback that you've gotten from the types of programs that you've done, both in the content space, because you've done tremendous work. I believe you were just named Content Marketer of the Year this past year, along with Opt Outside and the various other initiatives that you've taken. What kind of sentiment have you gotten?
Yeah, we see a lot of our customers and our members in particular just being, like I said with Opt Outside, really appreciative that we're using our brand as a platform to host these types of conversations. And I think you certainly hear from both sides of the table on everything, and we have a tolerance for that. But we absolutely see very positive and kind of reassuring conversations happening within our social feeds to us directly, to our board box, constantly about the stories that we're publishing, and more importantly, the actions that we're taking.
That's awesome. And, you know, Scott sort of set up the day as brands that take a stand. You know, taking a step back for just a second, too, I think REI has obviously put a stake in the ground with things that matter most to them. Can you talk a little bit about why REI has a right to do these types of things? Why you as an organization feel so strongly about taking the stands that you have?
Yeah. Honestly, I would say all of our brands in this room have the chance to leverage themselves as a platform. You have employees, you have customers, you have communities that you're living in and doing business in. And if you look at that as a platform to evoke change, I think your customers are going to be really responsive. And actually, if you don't consider doing that, it's going to be a different type of conversation that you're going to be having in a few years. We know customers are aligning their dollars with values. They have endless choices. So the more that you can actually stand for something greater than the goods that you're selling, I think you're going to find yourself in a much better spot.
Excellent. I know with limited time, I do want to ask what's next after you've done so much. And like I said, we're very proud to have been your partner along the way with these things. We're just as curious to hear sort of what you're leading towards as an organization.
Yeah, so we are the nation's largest co-op. And that by its nature makes us a different kind of company. We measure ourselves and our success with a yardstick that is made up of our employees, our members, stores, outdoor communities, as well as our business results. And because of that, we have looked at this past year and said, you know what, sustainability is a huge, huge, huge effort for us. We're incredibly passionate about it, and it hits on all 4 of those areas in a really important way. And so that's something that we're pushing hard into. Just this past month, we launched or announced the launch of new sustainability standards that are being deployed immediately. But more importantly, by 2020, any product that you purchase within REI's 4 walls will be a product that is working aggressively to minimize its footprint that it's leaving on the planet because of these new standards. And we're doing that in partnership with the brands that we're selling in our stores now. So the most important thing there is that we're doing it as a coalition of brands, not just one brand, which means that we can move this faster and further than we could ever do if we're doing it on our own. So we're incredibly appreciative of the partnership we have with the brands that we're selling in our stores.
That's awesome. So I think we actually finished right on time. So thank you so much for your time today. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you.
It's great. Thank you. Thanks. It's fantastic. So it's a minefield out there. We live in a time where a single tweet can incite a movement or a massive boycott, and a hashtag can become a global protest. Brands have been celebrated and decimated on social media, and Twitter is undoubtedly at the center of just about every single conversation. And a few months ago, Twitter released its first ever ad during the Oscars. To share the story behind the Here We Are campaign, please welcome the Global Head of Culture, Engagement, and Experiential Marketing for Twitter, Nola Weinstein.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here today surrounded by all of these transformative hashtags. It feels a whole lot like our office. Before I begin, I just wanted to share a fun fact with all of you. The hashtag itself was actually born on Twitter at the suggestion of one of our users, Chris Messina. It was developed as a means of organizing and driving conversation. Now it powers some of the most important transformative movements of our time. I think we can all agree it has been quite the year. Amidst economic uncertainty, a fractured political system, countless natural disasters and tragedies, women have been stepping up and stepping forward. They've been marching with their feet and also with their tweets. Over the past 6 months alone, we've seen a 50% increase in the volume of conversation around women's rights, equality, feminism, representation. So on the heels of all that, you can imagine our shock when conversations started to bubble up on Twitter around CES, the Consumer Electronics Show. They announced a slate of 6 keynote speakers to power their stage. And these speakers were all men. Where were the women? These men were certainly qualified, but something was definitely missing. CMOs, marketers, leaders in technology took to Twitter to share their distaste. Our CMO, Leslie Berlin, tweeted at them, "Hey CES, big respect for what you've built. Please do better here." And she actually did this in reference to a tweet from Brad Jakeman, who you'll hear from later. People were outraged. There are plenty of women who could take the stage. And so we decided to build a stage of our own. We brought together 6 women in tech from diverse backgrounds. Women like Linda Boff, CMO at GE, who's put out great work announcing the company's commitment to having 20,000 women in tech roles by the year 2020. Women like Kara Swisher of Recode. Women like Morgan DeBond, founder and CEO of Blavity, a content platform for millennials of color. They took to the stage and shared their story and their advice. 1 hour, 1 broadcast. We aired it live on Twitter. We expected the spot to have a few thousand views. It was a tech keynote stage. To date, over 6 million people have watched this, and a movement was born. We said then the issue was bigger than CES, bigger than tech, bigger than our industry, bigger than everyone in that room and this one. And that same weekend, conversation exploded around the world during the Golden Globes as people exclaimed, "Time's up." Over 2.6 million people used that tweet. 11.5 million said #MeToo. And so we decided this conversation was especially relevant in Hollywood as well, and decided to air Here We Are on an even bigger stage, on Hollywood's biggest night, We aired a 60-second spot during the Oscars. Here it is.
I heard a woman becomes herself the first time she speaks without permission. Then every word out her mouth a riot. Say beautiful and point to the map of your body. Say brave and wear your skin like a gown or a suit. Say hero and cast yourself in the lead role. When a girl pronounces her own name, there is glory. When a woman tells her own story, she lives forever. If this poem is the only thing that survives me, tell them this is how I happened. Tell them I built me a throne. Tell them when we discovered life on another planet, it was a woman, and she built a bridge, not a border. I heard this is how you make history. This is how you create a new world.
Thank you. So we aired this spot during the Oscars, and we're so gratified to see the impact it had on consumers, our partners, and as importantly, our employees. People were proud that not only were we standing for something, but willing to stand up for it. And it has never been more important for brands and leaders to stand up for what matters. But how do you decide? How do you decide if it's a worthwhile pursuit? Many will say, oh, do people want to hear from me? Do I have the right to play in that space? Consumers today are seeking guidance. They're craving hope, and they're eager to find deep, meaningful connections. But choosing what to engage in can be daunting. So what issues should you pick? How should you engage? How do you show up? And who is the best messenger? And I'm going to go through a few examples that may give you some guidance there. Choose the issues that are consistent with your purpose, your principles, and your product. Your purpose is your highest value. It's the reason you exist. When something flies in the face of that, good time to show up. Your principles are your non-negotiables. They underlie every decision you make and how you reason. And your product is how you keep the lights on. So when you think about a company like REI encouraging people to opt outside, health, wellness, fitness, that matters. When you think of beverage brands talking about sustainability and clean water, that matters. Their business relies on water. Our business relies on the free exchange of ideas. Twitter is about informing the world through the public conversation. And so when we hear conversation in reaction to a stage, it's a time for us to react. And in many cases, the issue will choose you. If you think of Verizon and other telco companies, they're about connection and conductivity, about individuals being able to reach each other. On the heels of countless fires ravaging California this year, Verizon put out this spot, really powerful, beautiful, moving, thanking firefighters, and sentiment afterwards was 97% positive because it's so directly aligned with Verizon's purpose, principles, and products. And when you think about the content, it's the content that builds the connection. It's so much more powerful to articulate what you stand for instead of what you stand against. And I always urge people to stick with a tone that's positive and productive instead of angry and deconstructive. What do you stand for? How will you stand for it instead of what do you stand against? A great example of this is Airbnb. Airbnb is a business predicated entirely of individuals trusting strangers, right? If you're a host, you have to trust these people who you're letting into your home. If you're a guest, you have to trust the place you're staying. Their mission and purpose is around creating a world where everyone belongs. On the heels of immigration reform, travel bans, Airbnb put out their We Accept campaign. Xenophobia can really hurt their business. And so Airbnb really took a stance with consistent, compelling, positive, exquisite content around the theme of We Accept. And the message started at the top. Their CEO, Brian Chesky, actually goes to visit these countries that were on the list of banned locations. He puts forth messaging that is meaningful. All of this aligns with their purpose in creating a world where everyone belongs, their principles of acceptance, and also their product. This is their core to their business. And so that brings me to the point of who is the best messenger. It should start at the top. Your leaders and all of you in this room are the embodiment of your brand ideals. You humanize your brands. You are the conscience. So another great example is Indra Nooyi, the CEO of PepsiCo. PepsiCo has performance with purpose, purpose with performance. She shared a spot for Gatorade. It features Serena Williams and her daughter Olympia around Sisters in Sweat. This is about keeping women in the game. Important for Gatorade, more women playing sports, more women in the game, more product being used. Also for Indra, who's one of the 27 CEOs of a Fortune 500 company who is female, encouraging women to stay in the game of business. And so this came from her, where it was credible and authentic and real. And lastly, I just want to point to a recent article that Mark Benioff shared around CEO activism that was written about in the Harvard Business Review, saying in many ways it's no longer a choice, it's a must. 65% of consumers are buying on the basis of their beliefs, and they're looking to you as leaders to stand up for what matters. And when done in a way that is credible and authentic, the impact is real for your customers, for your partners, for your employees, and for the world. Thank you.
That's great, Nola. Thank you so much. It's fantastic. Thank you. If we think back to previous eras of change, the interesting thing about those times of change is the effect it has on the stories that get told. Some of the greatest movies of all time were created out of social and political frustration and upheaval. In fact, in these woke times where consumers and audiences are deciding what to watch or buy based on the values of the companies producing them, content companies are being held to the same standard as brands to reflect the issues that their audiences care about. To discuss the role of content companies and how they approach storytelling and the programs they develop, please welcome the CEO of Awesomeness, Jordan Levin, who was also a speaker at our very first NewFront 11 years ago, along with the CEO of Hello Sunshine, Sarah Harden, in a conversation moderated by the head of content acquisition and programming for Verizon, Erin McPherson. Welcome.
And the script reads, your name right here, say something rude to me, rude to me, rude
Here we are.
to me.
Where are we going? Should I go in the middle? Should I go in the middle?
Sure.
Hi.
Hi.
Brand activism.
We want to amortize the cost of these props for Scott.
Scott, the handle's a little uncomfortable. Just want to tell you. When I marched in the Women's March, I was recently at what should I call it? A seminar in Tulum. It wasn't even a seminar, right? A retreat.
Is that what they call it?
That's what they call it.
Oh, okay.
And there was a workshop on protest poster making. And I was like, the times they are a-changin'. Like, come make your own protest poster. This is a very millennial event, as you might guess. So this will be really interesting. I'll be like this. Hi, everybody. Really excited to be here. I'm Erin, and I am really excited and happy to have a conversation with two executives who have played in so many different ways in the media and content business about this topic. So, of course, Jordan Levin, CEO of Awesomeness, long history in both traditional media and digital media, and of course, a long history catering and serving younger audiences, being CEO of WB, as well as a number of other very, very lauded positions. And Sarah Harden, CEO of Hello Sunshine, as Scott mentioned, the content company founded by Reese Witherspoon, and prior to that, Otter Media and Chernin Entertainment. And again, someone who has a lot of experience building brands and content across platforms. So I'll dive right in. I'd like each of you, we'll just start off with maybe talking a little bit about how each of your companies have taken a stand, or how you express your unique voice. And I'll start with Sarah, and the kind of audience that you're serving.
Great. Well, we're a pretty new company, a new brand, but our mission at its core is, we're building a media brand across all storytelling platforms, from film and television to audio to social storytelling, with a sort of singular mission across all of that, which is to change the narrative for women. And our focus in our first 18 months is really getting those storytelling engines rolling and serving our mission and the audience that we think there's a white space in how they've been served on digital and direct to consumer, and also in the film and television product that reflects the representation of the complexity of women's lived experiences, their life, and female identity.
Great. Jordan, maybe I'll let you start off just with how your company's gotten involved in taking a stand.
Yeah, I mean, I think, ultimately for us, we just sort of live by a creed and have tried to evolve, what we do and the scale of what we do based on that, which is if it's important to our audience, it's important to us. So I'm not sure I would characterize what we're doing as taking a stand so much as amplifying what matters to them and enabling them to have a voice and trying to provide some context and understanding and give them a platform.
Okay, yeah. We've talked about this topic a little bit earlier, and Sarah, you mentioned a word that I think everybody here is probably on the list of overused words, but that's because it's so appropriate and perfect, and that's authenticity. I guess when we're thinking about where and how brands should have a voice, right, and especially when you're looking at the kinds of content you develop and produce, talk a little bit about perhaps the role that plays in how you and your team is choosing projects or choosing partners to work with.
Well, I think it's a couple of things. I think our audiences are so smart, and I think it starts with that deep respect. I think, it was really interesting to hear the Twitter speaker there, and I couldn't agree. I mean, while this is a new brand, it really is a company that Reese has been building for 20 years, and the role she selected, she has a history of as a producer. And the commitment to her to elevate the voices of other women that not only deserve to be seen, but we think audiences will love. And everything flows from that deep commitment that I think people have been following her have seen. I think authorship matters. We're a company that's founded in storytelling, but we believe authenticity is about authorship, and that also means if we are telling stories that are representative of different lived experiences, you'd better have people involved in the creation of those stories who are connected to it. So it's not only important the faces we see on screen and the types of stories we reflect with those, but who's in the writer's room, who are on our crews, who are our showrunners, and even on social, as we, it's such a socially conscious audience, like who are our teams? So I think from everything from founder, leadership, mission, culture, it's all part of what shows up in any creative product. And audiences can smell the authenticity a mile off. So it's just, it's table stakes, I think, in engaging anyone today in a world that's so noisy and crowded and everyone's fighting for their attention.
Yeah. As you mentioned, Reese, she founded this company. She was at it before Me Too and Time's Up.
Yeah.
Right? Have those movements changed your approach or shifted the strategy or enhanced or?
Oh, look, it hasn't shifted our central mission. It's added a sense of urgency, and we're trying to build the company with a really long-term vision and commitment, but it's added a real sense of urgency, and it's created this incredible conversation as well. And I think men and women are showing up in a way that says, oh my goodness, the change is now. And so it's an exciting time. I feel like it is a problem-solving time. There's a lot of linking arms and a recognition that as culture changes, like we all have an opportunity to move into that and be part of and that shift. And Me Too and Time's Up are signals of a major cultural shift.
Do you worry about backlash?
Well, I think everyone should worry about backlash, but not for the reasons you might think. I think backlash is often a signal of really shitty execution. Like it isn't that a brand shouldn't take a stand, but they're not thoughtful in their execution, not thoughtful in their communications. They're not authentically representing the brand equity they've built with their audiences. They're asking their brand followers to pivot too quickly. So I think anyone should worry about execution and we should worry about backlash. And the first question should be, was this a fundamental disconnection in our values and our mission, or did we just shittily execute? And I think a lot of times it's shitty execution.
And if I can just jump in on that really quickly, I think it's also about coming across as looking opportunistic.
Yeah.
And that is obviously part of shitty execution, but are you taking advantage of something that is really meaningful to a group of people to just simply try and create a transaction?
Well, you read my mind, because I was going to ask you that about awesomeness. Like you read my mind.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a danger you're free riding on,
I don't think
on
so,
a young
because I
person's
think,
movement?
you know, awesomeness is really a company that was born in an age where, you know, our audience or our community is constantly dialoguing and engaging with us and with one another. And really the content that we create and what we do is provide a catalyst for that community. And so it's less of a unidirectional relationship. We're not in an era that, especially for a younger audience, Gen Z, you know, people, you know, high school, college, post-college, this is not an audience that engages in a linear manner. You know, it's a nonlinear consumption, and it's a relationship and an ongoing relationship. You're not serving to them. You're constantly engaged in a dialogue with them. And as long as that dialogue feels real, natural, as long as you're respecting them and you're reacting to their needs and allowing them a voice and a platform, I think that that there's less risk in that. There's obviously not a uniform voice across a generation. We see debate occurring, and as long as we can frame that debate and make sure that at the core we're capturing values that speak to sort of respect,
right,
and the respect we have for the audience, I think we'll always be in a good place.
Yeah, because this makes me think, you know, certainly a big part of the theme here is we've had an incredible, year, 18 months, just politically, economically, globally. We're very polarized. We found that social media is creating silos. Is taking a stand going to further polarize us? As content creators and storytellers, what is the obligation here? To be inclusive, more inclusive, or by taking a stand, do you think it could further polarize?
I've always sort of guided my belief upon something I was taught really early on, and that I truly believe, which is if you don't stand for something, you stand for nothing. So I think you're obligated as a company, a creator who has an underlying set of values to decide what you believe. Now, whether that is doctrinal in terms of a political ambition, whether that's more about a humanistic approach, I think that's really, you know, the debate that various companies are going to have. But we had a panel last night with a number of young women, and they were asked a question about how do they see brands and brands being politically active, and they said it's not really about whether a brand is active or not. For them, it's about, is a brand human? That behind every company, there's real people, and are they being empathetic? And are they treating people in a humane way? And they respond to brands that do that, despite whether or not they always agree with the politics of that brand. And I thought that was really, you know, illuminating that this idea that brands are sort of faceless, nameless corporations. They're smarter than that, and they want to relate to a brand that that they feel like has, you know, some dimension to it.
Has a voice.
I mean, I just add one thing to that too. I think we're in, because we're all mostly shareholder-driven companies too, and I just think, you know, the economics of knowing who you're for and building engagement and brand love, I mean, is so much more powerful. We're moving away, I think, from this thin relationship with lots of people. We look at it in our media, these reach relationships to relationships based on depth and engagement. I mean, the REI is such a good case example. I love that. I'm a huge REI customer. I tell you what, the love I have for that brand, and when I saw that campaign, you know what, if I spent $500 this year, and, you know, I've got a bunch of teenagers, so it's actually a lot more than that, but, you know, that should be the focus of brands, of like doubling down on who loves you, who's going to follow you, who's going to evangelize you, and don't worry about the reach customers. Now, I can say that as a position with someone trying to build a brand for a very specific audience, and I think for mass consumer products brands, man, your jobs are so hard. You should be getting hazard pay today as well, but I do think the economics of that, of like not only knowing who you're for, but serving your audience in the deepest, in the ways that build brand love, because it is the path through the media mess and the noisiest consumer landscape we have.
I used to say
economic wealth and shareholder value.
No, it's a great point. I used to say when I was at Maker Studios, like, to brands, your fans are already there. And in fact, they're already evangelizing your products and services, right? So why not? They're a community. They're a community.
I think
Why
it's
not
less
engage
about
them?
the political stand you take and what's the underlying values beneath it. You know,
Yep.
you can disagree on, again, a political approach, but underneath it is
Right.
how do you see people? How do you want to treat people? What do you think is important? How should we behave with one another?
Well, and you talked a little bit about the vote, right? Like, doesn't matter who you're voting for, vote.
Yeah,
as
I mean,
being, you know,
if we probably
as being
take
a value.
one stand as a company, it's trying to facilitate voter registration.
Yeah.
And get out the vote movement. You can vote however you want, but use your voice.
Yeah. Sarah, I was going to close with you by asking a question, but you kind of already answered it, which was, and you both have corporate investors, you work with a variety of distributors and other entities. Is there any risk involved in kind of taking a strong stand on something?
I think the risks are bigger. I think the risks are bigger for not being single-minded about knowing what your mission is, feeling that you work in a company where your mission is worthy, and going after it. And, you know, I think we're in a world right now where storytelling is the cut-through, and I think the focus on creatively excellent storytelling, you have to know that, and I think the risks of not front-footing that are so much larger. And they stem from mission and culture as well. And so if your board is aligned with your mission and your culture, you just have to, you know, the focus is then on creative execution. And I don't think we spend enough time talking, thinking, sweating that, because good creative execution today is just not good enough.
Right.
It's not going to get you anywhere. It has to be great.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think that's certainly our focus. But, you know, we're a much earlier company than many of these, but that's what we're heads down trying to do.
It's a great point. Well, thank you both. I think we're now responsible for running over, but hopefully it was for a good purpose. I mean, this was a fascinating conversation. Thank you, guys.
And now, to share an exciting announcement, please welcome Jill Kelly from Digitas and Jennifer Berman, the Senior Vice President of Marketing for Insider Inc.
We're excited to share the results of a joint research study by Digitas and Insider Inc. And I'm going to hand it over for Jennifer. Stage is yours.
All right. Thanks, Jill. So we've been hearing a lot today from brands who lead with their conscience and how the actions they're taking are rooted in convictions, not calculations. Yet the success of these brands, both short and long term, hinges on their ability to connect with the right consumers. Consumers who not only gather information, but take action and change the world around them. We're excited to reveal a study, a joint study with Digitas and Insider Inc., that dives deep into who these consumers are, how we can reach them, what makes them tick, and what their drive and where their drive to change the world comes from. So meet the Transformists, today's most influential global cohort. Transformists, first of all, are not all millennials. They are a group of individuals shaped by our rapidly evolving digital world, from boomers to Gen X to Gen Y, because it's not about age, it's about mindset. You'll recognize these faces. Transformists constantly read and consume information. They don't take other people's opinions as gospel, they weigh multiple points of view and formulate their own opinion. And they're twice as likely to act on the information they gather. These aren't passive readers, they're proactive doers. They are digitally savvy and unapologetically ambitious. They're constantly, restlessly seeking ways to improve their career, their understanding of the world, where and how they travel, eat, and experience art and culture. They're always up for an adventure. They're optimists who believe that they can change the world for the better, and they want to align with brands that feel the same way. 66% expect companies to conduct business in an ethical manner. 61% are more likely to buy a product if part of the proceeds goes to a cause they care about. And 9 in 10 are willing to pay more to buy from brands they trust. They're idealistic, inspired, and they're inspiring. They're more likely to donate to causes and volunteer, ride a bike rather than drive, or bring reusable bags to the grocery store. And that's in part because they are constantly innovating, iterating, and improving on themselves and the world around them. This cohort is a key driver of today's activist culture. They're impacting politicians, they're impacting brands, they're impacting fellow consumers, and they're going to impact every one of us in this room, pushing us to stand for more, to do more, and to be better every single day. So we're excited for what's coming up, and stay tuned for further updates and announcements in the coming weeks. Thank you.
Thanks, Jennifer. Thank you, that's great. The songs of this artist have touched on issues from marriage equality to gang violence in El Salvador. She joins us fresh off of a global tour as the culture ambassador of the U.S. State Department. Known for her dynamic vocals and her sharp social commentary, please welcome performer and activist and 9 times Austin Music Award winner and just an awesome individual, Gina Chavez.
What's up, everybody? How y'all feeling? Are y'all ready to party? I'm excited. So I actually I got the invite to join y'all when I was in Kyrgyzstan a couple weeks ago, and I've had the chance to travel all over the world with the U.S. State Department, as well as kind of also just being a musician and getting to share my music and share a message of empowerment and really being who you are. And at the same time, I've realized in going to places where being a woman or being a minority or being a lesbian, that I wouldn't be able to live the way that I live here, you know. And it kind of made me realize that I need to be a little more overt about that in my music. So I've written love songs before, but they were never, you know, very lesbian. And so anyway, so last year I did one of the most gay things you can do, and I got married to a woman. And it was something I never thought I'd be able to do in Texas, you know. And so, and I'm also Catholic, and my wife is Catholic, and we still go to a Catholic church. Even though we weren't able to get married there, which is frustrating and saddening, and at the same time we realized that, you know, sometimes you're called to leave, to go kind of be who you are, and sometimes you're asked to stay so you can teach people how to be yourself in an environment where that's tough. And so anyway, I offer you this song. It's called Heaven Knows, and it's a little bit about wrestling with that. The fact that I love my wife, and she has made me a better person and continues to help me strive to be the best person I can be, so that I can do the best for anybody that I have the chance to stand in front of. And I think that, you know, everybody in this room has that opportunity, right? Not only in our jobs and in you know, the powerful positions that you're in, but also just in your daily life. And so anyway, so I offer you this song, Heaven Knows, and I am going to need some water real quick. Heaven knows you're just my type. From your freckles to your baby toes, it's just right. I don't know why you chose me. Heaven knows I don't deserve such a woman with a heart of gold and the perfect curves. I don't know why you chose me. Heaven knows I love you. No one else above you. You make my heart beat so fast. Every day I want to shout to everyone that love is love is love is love, and ours was made to last. Heaven knows every star that shines, the night you cast me in your glow. And I thank God you walked into my life. I don't know how, I don't know why you chose me. Heaven knows I love you, no one else above you. You make my heart beat so fast. Every day I want to shout to everyone that love is love is love is love, and ours was made to last. Heaven knows our souls, our story, the shape of your heart when you hold me, wouldn't tear us apart or disown me. Baby, you're my one and only girl. Light this world with the sweetest sound. Yeah. I don't know how, I don't know why you chose me. Heaven knows I love you, no one else above you. You make my heart beat so fast. Every day I want to shout to everyone that love is love is love is love, and ours was made to last. Heaven knows, heaven knows, heaven knows.
That was fantastic. Thank you, Gina. And we'll be hearing from Gina again. I often think of storytelling as songwriting as the most intimate form of storytelling, and that's a great example of, again, how all of these things can impact storytelling and expressions of all kinds. So it wouldn't be a conference about branded content without a little branded content of our own. So I just wanted to take a few moments to thank the companies who helped make this year's Digitas NewFront possible. First of all, thank you to the Music Audience Exchange for bringing us that incredible performance by Gina Chavez. Music Audience Exchange helps match brands to the right music experiences, and they certainly got it right in that case. For those of you in our offices around the country at Digitas watching the live stream, thank you to Cheddar, the news network, for helping us bring our shows to every one of our offices and for hosting our own live pre-show on the Cheddar network. Thank you, Cheddar. And many of you remember John Steinberg of Cheddar was on stage last year and was one of our most popular speakers then, so it's great to have them as a partner. And lastly, I'd like to thank Pandora for bringing us DJ Ross One, who will mix beats at our cocktail party after the show. Thank you, Pandora. So we've spent this entire event so far talking about the climate that we're in, a climate where brands are put in the position of taking a stand on hot-button issues. But brand activism, or brandivism, as Brad Jakeman coined the term, can be risky. And as I said earlier, we as marketers have been trained to avoid controversy, but we're not going to do that here. We're not going to avoid discussing the fears and the worries and the risks and all in the discussion of whether and how brands can take a stand. Please welcome to the stage the Senior Advisor and former President of the PepsiCo Global Beverage Group, Brad Jakeman. Thanks for coming today, Brad.
Thank you for having me. Hi, everyone.
So when I called you up to talk about doing this, one of the things that you said right away was that brands doing no harm is kind of the table stakes, but that they have to do more now. They have to actually help bring about social good and a better world. That's a big ask, isn't it?
Yeah, but it's unfortunate. Well, it's fortunately actually the world that we live in. Unfortunately, though, being a marketer in a major company with a major brand right now is kind of sucky in a number of ways, because every day you're confronted with decisions where you either say, do I want my brand to be relevant or do I want my brand to be controversial? And there's virtually these days very little ground in between. And the videos that you played earlier is the risk as marketers we face. I happen to believe that a brand that is irrelevant is in much greater trouble than a brand that is controversial. Whether it intends to be, I don't know that too many brands, there are a few, but not a major group of brands, hold their hands up and go, today I'm going to be controversial. Often you wander into that ground unintentionally, as I have found out in previous experiences. But you have to kind of, it's not whether you go there, it's how you deal with it.
There are some brands who would argue that, we heard the protesters earlier, that they do want to stay neutral because they want to be for everyone. Is that even an option?
So one of the things I was taught, like when I first started out in marketing like 30 years ago, obviously when child labor laws were a lot less stringent.
When you were
exactly. I was told, you think of a brand as a person, right? You're essentially building a profile of a person. How many of our friends don't hold points of view on things? Question number one. And how many of our friends hold points of view that might be different than yours? Question number two. And question number three is, when they do you absolutely go after them and attack them? And then do you call all your friends to ask them to like go after and attack them? No. You respect that they have a point of view that may differ from your own. You engage in some level of debate constructively, and perhaps that person changes their point of view, and perhaps they don't. And that's what brands, that's how I like to think about brands taking a point of view on issues.
So what can a brand do to mitigate risk? Is there such a thing as taking a strategic approach to taking a stand, or is it just follow your heart?
You know what? In most of the brand faux pas that have happened, and it feels like one happens every week now, what generally happens is if you dig into it, brands just kind of unwittingly wandered into that territory. Very rarely did they set out to be controversial. Certainly they didn't set out to offend people, but they wandered into that. My advice to you guys, who I believe most of the audience are marketers, is plan that it's going to have a backlash. Like, just plan for that. And so what can you do to plan for it? Well, what is our response as a company going to be? That's typically something that you should think through before doing anything kind of major. But the second and much more important thing is, if something happens, who other than us is going to speak on our behalf? And part of the problem that we get into with these brand faux pas is all of a sudden you've got everybody, all the keyboard warriors hating on you, and then hating on the company, hating on you as an individual. And you have nobody out there kind of balancing the story. It's not cool. It's not chic to be putting the alternative side. We live in this kind of pile-on culture. So when you're doing that as a brand, line people up who are going to speak on your behalf to at least present a more balanced perspective. And look, if you've screwed up, you've screwed up. Apologize for it and just move on quickly.
Right. Some people get cynical about the idea, even when I've talked to some of my friends about what we were doing here today, about brands as activists, right? Because at the end of the day, they're like, hey, you know, you're just trying to sell me more toilet paper or beer. You know, what's your thought on this idea? Because, and I guess also from the point of view of a brand, if you're becoming an activist brand, people are going to more cynically or potentially closely look at everything you do to say, oh, you say this, but you do this.
Exactly.
You're opening up a lot of, you know.
Along the continuum of like this irrelevant, dormant kind of brand that I talked about before, and an activist brand, there's a lot of increments there. And so I'm not necessarily advocating every brand becomes an activist brand. What I am advocating is brands should stand for something, and typically stand for something in society. And I think you're going to hear from Phil Picardi from Teen Vogue coming up on stage to talk about how more and more younger people want to know not just what a company makes, but what makes the company. And more they want to know what the individuals who make up the company stand for. And so I'm actually talking about standing for something. I'm not talking about necessarily going all the way to kind of being an activist. But I think more and more we're not going to have a choice. And here's why. For the same reason that younger consumers want to actually do business with brands that stand for something, our younger marketers want to work on brands that have some social purpose. So the more you constrain them and the more rules you put around them being able to express that, the less likely you're going to be able to get like this amazing talent. So I think accept it, understand that you have to stand for something in the world that we live in today. Make sure that to the degree to which you're possible, you line up the company so that nobody can ever, as what happened with Audi when they were kind of advocating gender diversity, and we discovered that their entire board and management team are white straight men. That was slightly unfortunate for them. But at least know where those gaps are so you can say, we know that.
Right.
And we're not saying that we're perfect, but we're saying we're on a journey as well. We talked earlier in the panel about transparency. Just be transparent in your response.
And to me, there's not, it's not necessarily always about controversy, because it's really just if you have values, it's about expressing your truth, right? And so for REI, it's not so much they're coming out against Black Friday, so much as they're just standing for what they stand for, which is that outside is better. But when you get to be Dick's, and I love the fact, and we were supposed to have Dick's CMO here, he unfortunately couldn't make it, they literally came out and said, we sold this kid a gun, and it's not the gun that he used in the shooting, but it could have been, and we have a responsibility to make sure it's not the next time. Absolutely. And look, we all have to go home and tell our friends and family what we do for a living. And it gets harder and harder to do that when you don't really believe in what you're doing. And again, it gets back. For some reason in my generation of marketer, that was not as much of a problem. We could kind of pass out what we did in society from what we did in our careers. But for most younger people coming into companies like ours now, it is not, those distinctions are very blurred. And so they want their work life and their career to marry and reflect the values that they live their lives by. And therefore they want the brands that they manage, if they have the legitimacy to help move those issues forward, chances are they're going to lobby you to allow them to do that. Yeah. So I've known you for a long time, back from when I was editor of Ad Age, and you've always been someone who personally came out and took stands. You often spoke at industry conferences about things that you saw going wrong or things you took issues with. How important is it and Nola just talked about kind of it coming from the top, how important is it that individuals within companies have strong voices on these matters? Is it that as important as the company itself taking a stance? So I happen to believe that, again, that thing that I was just saying, kids today want to know not what the company makes, but what makes the company, and then what makes the people behind the company. They want to know what I stand for. When I was at PepsiCo running some of our most high-profile brands, people wanted to know what I stood for. There's one caveat, though, that I try and live by when I do comment on things like that. And as Nola mentioned before, I was one of the people who started this CES So White movement when it was revealed that the panel of speakers this year at CES were all white straight men. No, they were all white. Well, I don't know that they were all straight, but they were certainly white and men. Mostly white, and there was Asian American. And I started that, but I did it in a specific way. I started at least in a specific way, and when they ignored me, I just got increasingly pissed off and agitated. But I started by saying, hey, you've got a problem. Can I help you? I know tons of amazing women in tech who would love to stand up and speak at CES. Can I introduce you? Silence. Oh, okay. So let's try again. More silence. Okay, so let's get more of my CMO friends on. Kristen Lemkow from JP Morgan Chase, Antonio Lucio from HP. And still it was ignored. And so what I try and at least do is not just shit on everybody all the time, because it's so
so disheartening to be on the receiving end of it. And then I want to say one more thing that I'm trying to say at all conferences with marketers. But to actually be positive, to kind of go, this sucks, here's what I can do to help you, DM me if you're interested in helping. And the final thing I'll say to this kind of esteemed audience of marketing people, when next week or the week after, and trust me, it will be one of those weeks, we see another brand faux pas go on, here's the first thought that should run through your mind. The very first thought that should run through your mind is, but for the grace of God, go I. Because everybody in this room who manages a brand is 20 seconds away from something like that happening to them. So, but for the grace of God, go I, be your first thought. And then your second thought goes, is there any way I can reach out and help? So when the Dove issue happened, shortly after an issue that I was associated with, don't laugh, I reached out and I said, hey, hang on, Twitter sphere that is shitting all over a company that has advocated for women, advocated for the positive reinforcement of women, done things to enable that in society. Before we jump all over them to say this 12-second piece of footage abstracted from a 60-second piece of footage is really the penetrating insight into the truer, deeper, darker soul of Unilever and Dove, let's all just take a breath and say, do we think that, did they screw up? Maybe. I'm not convinced that they did. Did they really mean to? Did they set out to unravel 30 years of work? No, they didn't. So cut them a break. And if you're a marketer, reach out to help. Tweet some positive things about them. Please don't pile on. It's horrible to be on the receiving end of it. It's horrible. Your friends and family, you're ashamed when you go home to your friends and family. It's not cool. And it's unnecessary, and everybody in this room has the power to put positive energy into the Twitter sphere. So click with compassion.
Great note. Thank you, Brad.
Thank you.
One month after the election, Teen Vogue published a searing political op-ed by Lauren Duca called "Donald Trump is Gaslighting America." You probably heard about it because it had pundits debating endlessly, baffled that the source of this think piece was a platform aimed at teen girls. And it soon became clear that Teen Vogue has something to say. Under the leadership of Phil Picardi, Teen Vogue is radically transformed into a progressive political voice for America's youth. Anna Wintour has praised him as both fearless and marvelous. Please welcome to the stage the fearless and marvelous Chief Content Officer of Them and Teen Vogue, Philip Picardi.
Hello, everyone. I hope, I try every day to be fearless, but I hope that I can accomplish marvelous for all of you today. It's good to see you, and thank you for having me at NewFronts. I'm going to start, before I get into talking about teens and Generation Z and some gay things, I'm going to start talking about my upbringing, because it's kind of the source of where a lot of this came from. So names are a big thing in my family. I come from a big-ass Italian family, Catholic Italian family. So there are 5 of us, and 5 children in my family, and all of us have biblical names, right? So my dad wanted to name each of us after a saint or an apostle. So there's Courtney Ann, there's Robert Edward, there's Anthony, of course, Michael, and then there was me, Philip Francis. And after me, my mom got her tubes tied. She told her doctor in secret because she couldn't tell my Catholic Jesus freak dad. And then guess what happened? Mom got pregnant after she got her tubes tied. So she had to go home and tell my Jesus freak dad. And my dad said, "Oh my God, this baby is a Jesus miracle." And so we're going to name this baby after the Pope, John Paul. This is our baby John Paul after the Pope. So that's kind of what my upbringing was more or less framed after. So just imagine my 2 Italian parents with their very thick Boston accents trying to get all 5 kids down to go to school on time in the morning, right? So you hear them call up the stairs to each and every one of us. After I came out of the closet, though, my dad stopped calling me Philip Francis, and he adopted some new, more colorful names for me. I think it was his way of relating, you know? So he was like, "Hey, Liberace, get downstairs." All of you who laughed are homophobic, so I hope please make a donation to GLAAD after this speech. Yeah, it's a shame. So, Dad also called me Fruity Phil. Fruitcake was his favorite for my whole life. But there was a label that I wasn't super keen on. You know, the rest of it was bullying, but lighthearted bullying, you know, nothing I couldn't handle. But there was one day where my older brothers came home and they had this big masculine sit down with my dad, you know, so they bring him to the dinner table. And because the neighbors were talking about me and they were saying, "You know, Dad, there's a difference between Philip being gay. It's another thing for him to be a total faggot." And my dad said, "You know, he really is a disappointment." And if you know anything about a group of homosexuals, it's that we are very selective about the labels that we put on our bodies, ladies and gentlemen. So these weren't labels that I was super happy with. But as a kid who was growing up in this kind of a household, I was going to a very Catholic school. I had no gay people around me. I had no real teachers or role models to look up to. I felt more and increasingly alone. So somewhere after coming out and after being labeled a massive disappointment by my dad, I actually ended up getting a subscription to Vogue because I thought if my family wasn't going to accept me, I would need to find solace elsewhere. So I figured because I was watching Will and Grace, I knew that gay people were supposed to kind of talk to women about clothes. So I thought, if I could learn more about fashion, that'd be great. So I got a subscription to Vogue, and I started getting lost in, stories about princesses and their weddings and Balenciaga and looking at pictures of Gisele Bündchen. Still didn't do it for me, definitely still gay. And there was one issue of Vogue in particular where I read something that completely shocked me. And there was an article about fashion designers supporting marriage equality. And this is around 12 years ago, right? So marriage equality only really recently just became law of the land. But Anna Wintour, as the editor-in-chief of Vogue, ran this piece boldly declaring that Vogue stood on the side of love and that everyone deserved a chance at marriage. And I remember feeling so alone, feeling so unloved by my family and by the people around me, and knowing for the first time what it felt like to be truly and adequately represented. So that was around 12 years ago, you guys. So imagine 12 years later, 10 years later, let's say, I am running on the treadmill at Equinox in New York City, and I'm on mile 405, and my phone starts ringing like crazy. And it's 8:30 in the morning, so I'm assuming it's an emergency. I'm assuming Teen Vogue has done something else. Lauren Duca's written something else that has made everyone mad. So I pick up my phone, and this very polite young woman with a British accent answered on the other line and said, "Anna will see you in 15 minutes. I wasn't in the office yet. It was 8:30 in the morning. So I jumped off the treadmill. I went and took a shower. I opened my gym room locker. And of course, the only thing I had packed was a mesh t-shirt, ripped jeans, and I had forgotten shoes. So I was wearing these weird running sneakers. And I had to go for my first one-on-one meeting with Anna Wintour in this outfit. So I show up to Anna's office thinking, I'm definitely fired. This is over for me. And Anna sat me down to actually announce that I was being promoted to co-lead Teen Vogue at the time and have full autonomy over the digital operation. And I was super excited. But the conversation started with Anna asking me why I thought Teen Vogue was growing so fast on digital. For these kind of past 2 years at this point, Teen Vogue had been the fastest growing women's magazine on digital media for 2 years running. So we had grown the website from 2 to 12 million unique visitors per month. And the answer to why we had grown so fast had almost nothing to do with fashion or beauty. In fact, when I came back to Teen Vogue, I knew that most of our audience was finding fashion and beauty tips on places like Instagram and YouTube from influencers they were following. So Teen Vogue necessarily had to pivot its content strategy to fill this white space, which was substance. So we covered for the first time reproductive justice, the election, sexual health, gender identity, how to negotiate a pay raise, and all sorts of other things. And the real response was that our readers really realized that they needed us. We invited a plus-size model to take us on her body positivity journey for a fashion video series that won a Webby Award. At the height of the Dakota Access Pipeline protests, we invited 6 Native American teenage girls to come to set with us and explain the real history behind Thanksgiving. P.S., it's genocide, and they flipped over a Thanksgiving dinner table in protest of the holiday. And during the height of the Black Lives Matter protests, we as a brand decided that we would take a stand and say Black Lives Matter as well, because we didn't believe that was a political statement. We thought it was a personal one. So all of that success at Teen Vogue had catapulted us into our success. And Anna looked at me, and I was terrified to say all of this to her because I was afraid she might think it was too risky. And instead, she said, "You have to stand for something." So a year later, I get invited to one more one-on-one with Anna Wintour. And this time, I wore something nice. And I forget what I wore, but I think it was cute. And at least this time, the question was more open-ended. And it was a question, it was a conversation. She said, "What do you think the future of publishing has in store?" And so I started talking about what I had seen from my time at Teen Vogue, specifically as it kind of related to the LGBTQ community. So I knew that this generation had grown up with marriage equality largely as law of the land, which is incredible. Thank you, Obama. And I also knew that this concept of gender was shifting pretty radically, right? That the trans rights movement is really a civil rights frontier that all of us need to be paying attention to. So I told Anna this, fully expecting, I don't know, 1.5 million questions or maybe an eye roll. I wasn't sure what I was going to get. Instead, Anna looked at me and said, "That makes sense." 4 months later, with her help and the help of a lot of other people, we lit up the Freedom Tower in the colors of the rainbow, and in partnership with GLAAD, we launched Them, Condé Nast's first ever LGBTQ publication, and the first dedicated brand launch at Condé Nast in over 14 years. Standing for something has been central to our brand's development and relevance in a competitive media landscape, and in a crowded media landscape. This is how we have made connections with our audience. And I know so much of this stuff. I talk to brands all the time. I know so much of this stuff can feel intimidating or daunting or even scary, but it really doesn't have to. So before I go, I have just 4 things I think all of you should keep in mind before you decide to stand for something. The first is that you have to take a stand on the things that feel authentic. You don't need to enter every single conversation, and you don't need to take a massive political stance. So a couple of examples, right? Patagonia is a great one, right? They took a really hard line against Trump and in defending national monuments, right, as part of their brand mission, which I think is great. Alternatively, another approach towards sustainability was Versace, Gucci, Michael Kors, all outlining their plans to go completely fur-free at their brands, which is huge in the fashion industry. And it signals to a younger consumer that they're prizing sustainability as kind of a brand pillar. I also think of Christopher Bailey's collection at Burberry. How many of you saw the Rainbow Check collection at London Fashion Week? Thank you, ma'am. Yes. So basically, Christopher Bailey took the classic Burberry check. I'm sure you all know what that looks like, at least I hope, if you don't Google. And he put, you never know. And he put a rainbow right through it, and it was this beautiful moment during the collection. So he asked them to photograph the collection, to be the first publication to photograph it. So we delivered this image, I was a little nervous, of these 2 boys who were dating in London. We delivered this picture of them kissing each other, like this, actually like a hard kiss, not like a cute kiss, like a kiss, And we sent it to Burberry, and they posted it on their Instagram, and it was the most successful Instagram post they've had since their beginning of Instagram. And they were one of the first fashion brands on that platform. So that was a huge deal. It showed that they stood for something and their audience rallied around that, because with a gay designer there for 17 years, that only made sense for them. These are external and internal policies that I think create brand affinity at varying levels of public risk. But number 2 is that you shouldn't be afraid of risk. If you have the privilege to sit in this room, to go to NewFronts, to talk to all these high-power individuals who are next to you, you really shouldn't be afraid of risk. It should all be about being a leader. And being a leader means that your feet are often held to the fire. That is a good thing. But this is what I want you to consider when it comes to risk. Commenters on social media are not necessarily your customers, okay? So the amount of hate mail I receive from parents who are like, "My daughters will never read Teen Vogue again." You don't know what your daughters are reading. You can't look at their phones. They open their phones 100 times a day. My audience numbers were never higher than when some lunatic started a bonfire in her backyard with my magazines, So the New Yorker, Vanity Fair, at the height of their Trump crises, that was when subscriptions were going through the roof, right? If you have and take a stand for something, brand affinity gets stronger. The commenters are just a little bit louder because they're a little bit crazier, okay? Number 3, it's how and who makes your messaging. So Generation Z, we like to say, 44% of all US consumers by the year 2020, right? Over 50% of Generation Z is not white, and it's also shown in multiple polls that over 50% of Generation Z will be neither strictly heterosexual or strictly cisgender. So this is a huge statistic because if you look around your boardrooms, your ideation and brainstorm meetings, if you walk through your hallways of your offices, what does your office look like? Does it look like the audience you're trying to reach? If you invite more people to the table, you may have more impactful brand messaging. Diversity is just good for business, period. And finally, only old people say that we should keep politics out of anything. So if you have ever been able to say at like a dinner table that like, I don't know, let's not get political here, let's not talk about Me Too, right? That's probably because you're not maybe a woman, you've maybe never been sexually assaulted or sexually harassed. If you think transgender equality is something that is solely political, you're actually talking about someone's basic human rights to live, right? And so young people do not look at politics as this kind of segmented idea in our lives. We look at it as what is personal. And so our public sector and our government is more prone to nuanced conversations surrounding a white supremacist rally in Charlottesville instead of having a nice conversation over the largest youth march in our nation's history for common sense gun laws. Politicians would rather pick on Parkland kids than enact legislation to protect them. These are dark times, right? Let's just be honest. We have to wake up every day and decide what teenagers are going to read for the news every day. It's not just a matter of clever marketing or relevance to stand for something, it's literally your responsibility. And take it from me, a kid who once felt alone and by himself and who once thought he may never find love. The images we create, the places they appear, on social, billboards, magazines, or otherwise, have the power to literally save a life. And that power is in all of your hands. Thank you.
Thanks, Philip. That was great. In January, over 300 women who work in film and television and theater came together to address what was once a private but now a very public issue of sexual harassment in the entertainment industry. This was a united call for a change from women for women in entertainment and everywhere. This call was heard by many, including our own. Female leaders across our industry came together to form Time's Up Advertising, and I'm proud to say Digitas has also signed up and stands up with Time's Up. I am thrilled and honored to introduce the next session, three of the founding members of Time's Up, my girl, Christy Hellberger of CAA, and the founder of Latina Magazine, actor and activist Amber Tamblyn, in a conversation moderated by New York Media CEO Pam Wasserstein. Come on up, ladies.
I know, it's a high tone. Hi, thanks for having us here.
Hello.
So ladies, Time's Up did not exist until very recently. It just launched on January 1st. So let's start by just talking a little bit about Time's Up, how it came out of the Me Too moment. I'll just say for those of us who have been involved, one of the things that's really thrilling about it is that it's a movement of action.
Mm-hmm.
So tell me how that happened. Christy.
Yeah, I'm happy to start. So back in October, you all may recall, every week and the incredibly awful and just appalling news that we were getting, this constant sort of wave of every time you open, does anyone open a newspaper? I guess open an iPad, right?
Magazine.
Magazine. Well, one of the weird, things is that if you are not in that industry, the idea that your industry is actually now the poster child of, sexual predatory behavior, and those things were so upsetting to us. And so a group of us, a cross-section of folks, so people from my firm at CAA, people from our competitors, agencies, actresses, producers, directors, television writers, a huge cross-section of us got together on a Friday afternoon, and we thought, you know what, we're going to do something about this. And if you really need to get something done, ask a group of really busy women, because that's how it happens.
For sure.
And we decided,
you know, the truth is we actually needed to change what was happening in a meaningful way so that it wouldn't happen again. And so if you want to sort of understand the difference between Me Too and Time's Up is the action that we're going to take so that no one else has to say Me Too, right? And when I think about the opportunity that is before us, that was, you know, we didn't want to waste a crisis. And if we have a moment to actually stop and reset the expectations and the ways that which we operate, you know, we could do so. And then Monica Ramirez from the Alianza Campesina, which is the farm workers women, sent us this amazing letter. Do you want to talk about it?
Yeah, so we, exactly what Chrissy said, there were so many of us here in New York, and it really sort of started as a group of women in Los Angeles and a group of women in New York. And as I've said, you know, it was this culmination of women being angry and organized, which I call angrenized, which is, we all had this sort of mission. We didn't know exactly where we were going, what we were doing with it, but we knew that things couldn't stay the same anymore. And I remember a letter was brought to us by the women of the Farm Workers Union, which none of us had seen. This is sort of how separate some of us are in our pains and our stories. And they had, the women of the Farm Workers Union had, over 700,000 of them, I believe, had signed this letter saying that they stand in solidarity with the women in the entertainment business. And one of the women, you know, within the meeting space said, we need to respond to them. And before you knew it, it was like, okay, we're going to respond, and then what are we going to do with that response? What is an action that we are going to tie to the response so that it's meaningful, so that we're saying we're not just talking about the change, we are actually enacting it. And then, you know, some of the other women that were in some of these rooms were also lawyers, and we decided to start talking about what eventually became the Legal Defense Fund. So it started small, but it started with this deep passion to change things and to see a different world.
I wanted to say two things about the passion. You know, it feels like a personal affront, right? When you're like, wait, not on my watch, not in my house, right? This is how we sort of felt. And there are two things that I think were really important that came out of it. One was in sort of our rules of the road in Time's Up, we always talk about your anger, your anger can be your motivation, but it can't be your message.
Yeah.
And the second thing is that we aspire to be joyful warriors, because the truth is this is going to be a long journey, and if we're not joyful warriors, nobody else will want to enlist, right? And so one of the great joys of this for me is the opportunity to spend time with Amber, for example, and to see, you know, Amber's work talking about sort of how exciting it was to go think about a red carpet experience that wasn't about what I'm wearing.
Yeah.
You know, which I'd never thought about, because I'm not an actor. I don't have to do that. I don't have to, you know, thankfully, don't have to do that. I don't know how you do it. But Amber has been writing fantastic pieces for the New York Times recently. But it's such an interesting thing that emerges from this kind of movement, is that you find alliances with people and you see perspectives you would have never otherwise encountered.
We even felt that way, I think, within the meetings we've been having in New York, connecting with women in media, women in advertising, you know, women across industries, and saying, oh my God, there's so much similarity. I mean, we felt that in such a small way, just with the actresses that met here. And it almost felt like an entire system and world that really had been keeping us apart for so long. And now here we were in the room working together.
There's peer-to-peer conversations that really had not been happening, I think in part because in many, many rooms of power, there aren't that many women in the room, right? And so there's not that opportunity to sort of own the conversation in that space.
Yeah. Right.
You're sort of separated.
And I think one of the things that we found very quickly was that, you know, we did not want to do things that would just sort of set our industry on a better path, right? We really wanted to do something for the women who are picking our food, and the women who are cleaning our houses, and the women who are, you know, taking care of our society in many ways, and the men too, but people who have been, you know, victimized. The Legal Defense Fund has got already some 2,500 people, you know, who've asked for help, including a woman who works in security at a nuclear power plant.
Wow.
And I thought to myself, you know, that's the woman that we're charging with keeping us safe, and she doesn't feel safe at work.
Wow.
You know? we can't just fix it for ourselves and our industries. We have to actually sort of elevate our entire culture.
Well, and how do you think in the creative community and TV and film, there's so much visibility in the advertising industry too, and how do you think about the responsibility of representation and how you're seeing now the community reacting to the Time's Up movement?
I think one of the most important things, it's interesting, Phil, who was just right on before us, Phil is sort of responsible for my career as sort of this cultural voice in this movement, in this moment. Last year, when I first shared a story about an actor picking me up when I was 17 years old, it was Phil who published an open letter to him, which then led to my relationship with the New York Times. And Phil realized that there was a responsibility to allow these stories to exist in order to fulfill a greater, more important change. Another great example of that right now are the businesses that are signing on to the Mute R. Kelly movement, which is something that we came onto within Time's Up, and that it's important to say, while we support the artwork, while we support the freedom of art and the freedom of expression, we have to draw a line somewhere because that's what the culture is doing. The culture is saying that there must be a space in which people can create and people can be artists, but that women don't have to suffer, women and men don't have to suffer physically, emotionally at the abuses of certain people. So I think looking at things like that are really important as far as when Phil talks about how it's not separated anymore, and I'm sort of this bizarre cusp millennial. I'm right at the edge of it, so I both get to claim it,
You're an
both get
older
to talk shit
millennial.
about it.
It's some millennials talk about that there's a distinction actually between the culture
as a millennial,
of older millennial, younger millennial.
Yes.
I dare not reveal my generation.
But no, I mean that really Phil is speaking to the truth, and my 17-year-old niece, my whole most of the kids that I know are of that value. They believe in that value. They believe that these two things must coexist. They must come hand in hand, that what they buy, that what they listen to is part of who they are at a core, that it's not just something, they're so smart. They themselves are creating their own Finstas and all this stuff in which they can market themselves. So in that way, we have to be more genuine to them. We have to be more generous and genuine to the younger generations because they see us, they know. And so they want the value that they see in themselves represented in what's being advertised to them.
Yeah, we run a women's site called The Cut, which has also been...
The Cut is amazing.
Thank you. Active in this cultural conversation, and actually over many years had been doing really sort of nuanced and leading writing around not only sexual harassment and those kinds of things, but also gender and power and sort of difficult conversations there. And what's been interesting for us is that brands that we work with that maybe in the past were aligning with us for other reasons are now turning to us to help them participate in this moment. A lot of the conversation over the course of the program today has been that not engaging in conversation is now a choice. You sort of can't be neutral anymore.
There's a point at which it looks absurd, right? That you're like, oh, here's the millennial or the Gen Z life, but none of these things are happening in it, then it suddenly dissociates itself from reality, I think, and doesn't feel authentic any longer.
Yeah, and authenticity is so key.
Word.
Yes.
In favor of it, yes.
Because it's easy to go wrong, I think. Even when a heart is in the right place, you do have to start with kind of a firm sense of values and then go live those values.
Yep, 100%.
So what's next for Time's Up, and what are you hoping to see coming in the months and even years ahead?
So I'm excited about a couple of things. One of them is, certainly the inclusion writer stuff, right? And I'm spending a lot of time, and a lot of my cohort in Los Angeles spending a lot of time actually developing the tools, because if we're demanding that you try and be more inclusive in your casting, in your hiring of writers on a television show, or in your crew or in a production, a lot of you say, well, I don't know any of those people. And my job, I feel like, is to take all the excuses away. So we're putting together databases of inclusive, of women directors, of all, I have a list now of women, unit production managers, trying to find those folks so that we can take that excuse away and make
totally.
it.
Oh,
feel
I don't know any.
You want to do things
here you go.
differently.
Got 'em.
I always say you have to go cut their meat for them. Like you
Right.
have to cut your meat for people.
Yep.
And so we're trying to cut the meat for people a little bit. One of the things that I'm really excited about, I was just talking to Jill about, is, a lot of actresses are like, I'd like to see more inclusive voices covering my press junket for the movie.
Yeah.
And basically, how do we, if 84% of the Rotten Tomatoes critics are all white guys, maybe I'd like to get another perspective on my work before I'm, out in the marketplace. And so we're putting together, listen, who are those journalists that we can pull up and give a seat at the table and credentials so that they can get access and we get their perspective in the room. One of the things I'm excited about, though, particularly, is that, diversity and inclusion drives innovation. And Time's Up is actually not just about women and sexual harassment. It's actually about safety and equity and opportunity for everybody. And so the great news is that because we know that new voices and new inputs are going to drive new outcomes, that we're going to see innovation, we're going to see business opportunities. My firm does a lot. There's a lot of bias disguising itself as knowledge. I was talking about,
We've done a lot of work around the economics of diversity and content.
People in
right?
Asia don't want to see black people. Turns out not true. Just nobody had ever rolled a film out in a big way with a black protagonist, and now we have. And it turns out they like people. It's just there's a lot of this sort of bias looking like knowledge, and we have so much data now, and we're publishing more and more of it. What we found was that for over the 560 films that have been released in the last 4 years, films that had a 30% or more non-white cast outperformed movies with an overwhelmingly white cast at every budget level in not only domestic but global performance. Mm-hmm. It drives a new look. How many superhero movies have we seen? But we hadn't seen a woman, and we hadn't seen a person of color. And then we had Wonder Woman and Black Panther, and they were the first two innovations on a genre that we'd seen a lot of. And so I'm excited about what's coming because, women directed 4% of the 1,000 largest films. Talent is equally distributed, opportunities are not. And if we can use this opportunity to catalyze throwing the door open for a few more folks, I think we're going to see a lot more talent.
Amber, you've worked behind the camera as well as
Yes.
behind the camera. And
Yes.
so how are you starting to see change kind of behind the scenes too?
Yeah, it's very slow, and my film certainly it's so interesting. I'll just tell you the briefest story, but my film, which has a 96% on Rotten Tomatoes, which I think is the shit. If anyone is ever curious to see a film that would look like Quentin Tarantino directing Grey Gardens, see my movie. That being said, it was so hard to fucking sell it. And part of the issue was about the people.
Was that how you tried to sell it? Okay.
But it was not necessarily about the film itself, but it was about the people who were actually buying it. And primarily, they were not interested in seeing this particular type of story about extremely volatile and violent women. And I think that the more that people go out on a limb, the more people are looking for complex, provocative, potent stories about any type of person, the more we're going to win. I think so much of the conversation, especially about filmmaking and movies, and oh my God, now that there's streaming, Hollywood is over. The actual cinemas aren't. People aren't going to see movies anymore. I think people also don't go see movies because they're boring, because we've recycled the same conversations over and over and over again, and it takes somebody to go out on the ledge and say, there is a whole world and there is a whole space that for people to see movies that look like them, that sound like them, that tell their stories, and those too can be successful. We just have to collectively say yes to that. We have to stop looking at, especially as corporations and distribution companies in our industry, they look at the other successes of the other movies in other distribution companies, and they're like, well, that type of movie failed. This is the type of movie that works. But you can't guess that based on one thing that was done, a movie that was made 8 years ago. And you have to look at everything and say, there's a reason that a lot of what's being made right now doesn't work anymore. And that's because people are hungry to see something new and intense and innovative, frankly. And there's, you know, it's amazing to say that it's innovative to tell these types of stories about women and minorities and these communities that haven't really had any space in film and television, and frankly in theater as well. New York has a real problem with its theater community where there are no women, and certainly no women of color reviewers here in any of the major magazines.
We have a woman reviewer. She's great.
Yes, and also there's also an incredible, you all, if you don't know about this thing called Cherry Picks, go throw your dollar bills at that, because every woman I know is obsessed with it. It's the version of Rotten Tomatoes that is only female film critics, and they've started a little company that I think is actually going to be quite interesting and successful. So I think that it's just about thinking outside of this branded box and saying, you know, well, we tried to open that door, but that door doesn't open, and that door doesn't lead to anything. It's like, okay, well, go fucking build your own house. And open those doors. And people will go to them because they want it.
Can I make one plea? Last plea, I know we're out of time. Yes. But I feel like the great thing about the entertainment industry is that what we do matters, and what you do matters. You are creating and distributing messages, and we all get to tell people what a hero looks like and what normal looks like. And that matters a great deal. There's 7 billion people on the planet. Most of them will never come to the United States, but they'll see our movies and our television and our advertising, and we get to drive that. And so I encourage you to take that responsibility and the opportunity of that to say something novel, because I think it'll be good business, but it's also really actually good for humanity.
Agreed.
That's a great note to end. Thank you both
Thank
so
you.
much.
Thanks so much, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Pam. Thanks, Emily. Thank you, Christy.
It was amazing. Now we have an exciting announcement with our partner, Notch. You may recall their CEO, Anda Ganska, was on stage with us last year. Let me now bring out Laura Vandenberg, Senior Vice President of Communications from Notch. So we find that picking the right content partner is a bit like Tinder dating. Random swipes, pick one, and hope you get lucky. But what if it could be more like eHarmony, where you're matched with a partner not on a whim, but by using detailed data, information, and interest to find the one just for you? It's exactly what we set out to do with Notch, to create a content planning tool that you can trust to find the right partner. Notch has been a strong advocate for transparent data reporting and a great partner to Digitas in making sure our clients are getting the best bang for their content bucks, which is why we teamed up with them to help disrupt and improve the planning process.
When Digitas approached Notch, we were already having similar conversations with our brand customers about how to bring transparency to their content planning process. Now, while Notch has been outspoken about being a brand-centric intelligence platform, we also work very closely with publishers and agencies. And over the last 3 years, we've come to realize that most brand partners are focused on improving ROI at the end of a campaign once all relevant data has been collected. But Digitas came to us with this request to think about ROI from before the campaign even goes live. As one of the strongest voices in our industry advocating for quality content and premium publishers, we're really excited to have Digitas as our partner for our beta agency partner. So, what we're very excited to share with you today is Notch's answer to the intelligent planning process, Blueprint. Blueprint is a data product that combines Notch proprietary data with industry benchmarks to showcase the best potential partners and creative themes for a brand's future content efforts. I'm about to unveil a sneak peek into the product we believe is going to revolutionize the content planning process. But keep in mind the following is dummy data. We're making you pay for the real stuff. Blueprint will allow for marketers to input a set of search criteria from your demographic, your target KPIs, and your creative goals. It will then provide an output of publishers ranked in order of best match based upon historic data we already know about your brands, like your competitors, the partners you've worked with, and your target audience, combined with the search criteria that you've already entered. Blueprint seeks to solidify content plans with the power of real-time insights. From here, you have the ability to take a deeper dive into publishers, brands, the themes you've used in the past, as well as industry white space. With the introduction of Blueprint, Notch can now help predict and inform impactful creative and distribution, measure and optimize content once live, while helping benchmark and compare performance towards the end of the content lifecycle. We do think that Blueprint is a true revolution to the content planning process, and we're so excited to launch this product alongside Digitas and our Notch customers.
And if you want to know more, and you know you do, just come talk to us after the show. Thank you, Laura. And now, one more time, Gina Chavez.
All right, we're gonna party now. Y'all ready for that? I'm gonna need your help though. So I'm gonna take you to Soyapango. My wife and I, before we got married, we actually we went to live with Catholic nuns, a gang-dominated part of San Salvador. And I know we've been talking about action, and so this was kind of the biggest action that we've taken in our lives, and kind of stopping our lives in the United States and going to El Salvador to do mission work and really just serve young women there in an all-girls school. And what we found was those young women changed our lives. And, you know, I think just like we've heard today from so many different speakers, so many different brands, you know, I think that social reformation starts with the individual. And so, you know, it's about us being our authentic selves, but finding what gets us in the gut. You know what I mean? And that's what our trip to El Salvador was it was kind of a kick in the gut. And I wrote this song called Siete de. It's kind of a party song. We're gonna get on the Siete de bus in El Salvador, the 7D. And the very short story is, we had heard from the volunteers before us that, you know, this was the bus that would kind of connect us to the rest of San Salvador, and, you know, get to other parts if we wanted to go like watch the movies and the super like first world part of San Salvador, and you know, or if we wanted to go to the beach or something like that. And we tried to hop on the Siete de, and there's not bus stops. You just stand on the street and somebody picks you up. And there's a guy that leans out the bus and he's like, sube, 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 vamos al centro, vamos a, you know, he's basically like, hey, get on the bus, we're going to go all the places, and, you know. And so we're standing and we're waiting and we're waiting and we're waiting. And if there's anything you know in Central America, you don't have to wait for a bus for very long. And we find out the next day that the owners of the 7D bus line were so upset at the gang members for killing their bus drivers that they shut the route down for a day. And that's reality. That's reality in El Salvador. And that's not even the worst of it. It got a lot worse after we left. But that's what these young women grow up in. We would walk outside the doors of the school, and 10 feet from the door would be a chalk drawing of somebody that had been murdered the night before. You know, and so everything's kind of relative, and we were like, wow, so now we're going to go back to our first world lives. And that just feels wrong, just to leave these young women who have really changed our lives by embracing us. And so we started a college scholarship fund. It's called Niñas Arriba, and last Friday we actually just celebrated our 3rd graduate. And it's so exciting to see people like you. We throw benefit concerts, and people like you and me just giving a few bucks here and there. We've been able to raise over $50,000 and put 3 young women through college. And thank you. We're now trying to grow the program. So anyway, I invite you to join me today. We're going to get on the Siete de bus, and we're going to go on a crazy ride through El Salvador. I usually have a band with me, so I'm going to need your help in a lot of ways, okay? So we're gonna scream sube, which means get up. In this case, it means get on the bus, okay? S-U-B-E, sube. Can y'all do that? Sube! All right, I think you're ready. And then I might get you to kind of clap or something with me, because we need some ritmo up in here. So this is all in Spanish. Picture yourself getting on an old American school bus, painted crazy colors, and named something like Estefany or Mano de Dios. And there's like pictures of SpongeBob and like naked women and all kinds of crazy things in the bus. And they blare reggaeton music, which is like Latin hip hop. So it's like all right? So that's the vibe, okay? Again, I'm by myself up here, so you gotta help me out. All right. But we're gonna start this way. When I say siete de, you say sube siete de. All right, we're getting a little faster here. Here we go. You guys are ready now. When I say siete de, you say sube siete de. Siete de sube. When I say siete de, you say sube siete de. Sube siete de. When I say A, you say O. A, O, A. When I say siete de, you say sube siete de. Here we go. Soy gringa en una tierra latina chelita, en un país central. Quiero conocer todos lados, desde soy a la cima de Salco. Voy deprisa y andando perdida está lleno. Donde me siento, oye que pega pa' que abren la puerta. Cómo llegar hacia atrás, sigue abierta. Sube, sube la 7 de sube. ¡Ey! ¡Oh! Sube, sube la 7 de sube. ¡Ey! ¡Oh! Sube, sube la 7 de sube. ¡Ey! ¡Oh! Sube, sube la 7 de. Sorpresa, no hay buses, hoy las noticias gritan cual cobrador. Mejor tómate una coste, nos ganaron las malas esta vez. Velocidades, sabe bucero 2 la primera y la locura. Agárrate mi chero lo que encuentres, bailamos sus canciones. Sube, sube la 7 de sube. ¡Ey! Oh, sube, sube la 7 de. A ver, sube, sube la 7 de. Vamos a ver al mundo. Sube, sube la 7 de. All right, I need you to clap your hands. Here we go. Sa, 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 sa. Yeah. Yo quiero vagar, aunque me cuesta observar lo que veo a pasar las champas. Desde Tonecatepec por calles de oro al parque infantil, llegar a Metrocentro, luego galerías, llévame a la Gran Vía, el Boulevard Éxito, la trabazón que había. Ando pisto y tu pistola, pero vos no me controlas ni en Arizona. Como un ramo, yo no pago la extorsión, tampoco piolín, ni la mano de Dios, ni la panela es vestido mío la mata, ni los temas que si te va a cantar andamos un poco, 20 centavos y país, porque quedas en todo lado. Voy a centro, a catedral, pedir a Santo Romero en estilo oeste. Sube, sube la 7 de. Vamos a ver al mundo. Sube, sube la 7 de sube. A ver, sube, sube la 7 de sube. Ey, oh, sube, sube la 7 de. Hay que correr la ciudad por vistas de boda con una persiana y brindar por libertad. Subimos a los planes antes de concluir. Dame, dame 2 pupusas y me echo a dormir. Muchas gracias. I'm Gina Chavez. Thank y'all so much for being here today. Digitas NewFront.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Global Brand President of Digitas, Michael Kahn. But you can call him MK.
Whoa! Wow, that was just incredible. And can we have another round of applause for Gina? That was amazing. Amazing. Amazing day, and I want to call and recognize all the folks that have participated with us today. The New York Times, Christy, Pam, Jody, REI, Sarah, Twitter, Amber, Brad, Philip, Aaron, and all of the other participants in today's content. Let's have a giant round of applause for all of them. And I also want to give you all a giant round of applause. We did go a little bit long today. I am the last stop before cocktails, which will begin momentarily. And I want to thank you all for participating. Before I get into any other comments for the day, I want to come back and say that every once in a while we go to a day and you remember again why you're in this business and what the motivations are for it and why we do what we do every single day. This was one of those days. This is one of those good days when you leave here and go, wow, we really can make a difference, and that's what we should try and do with every bit of our efforts in every single way. And when you think about all the people that were here today, they're all distinct kinds of brands and businesses and sponsors and platforms and all that, but what they're all doing together is they're in pursuit of seeking the truth and speaking the truth in everything they do. And that's not unlike what we're trying to do at Digitas. We recently went through redoing our pledge and our commitment to pursue truth, connection, wonder in every engagement we pursue, to do better on behalf of brands and help them make better connections with the people they serve and connect to in the marketplace. And I do have to come back and say that if there's a takeaway from today and from all that's gone on, it is definitely time for brands to take a stand, and for us and all their agency partners to help them do so. You can't be on the sidelines anymore. The world's moving too fast. There's too many contact points. And I think the truest thing said today by everyone, Scott and all the speakers, are if you stand for nothing, you'll be looked at as nothing. And brands want more. They want more from the leadership of the companies. Consumers want more from the leadership of the companies they deal with, from the brand behaviors, from taking a stand, and all the dynamic things that are going in our marketplace today. And that could be about Time's Up, that could be about Take a Knee, that could be about Me Too. It's all these things coming together and what's on the pike that we don't even know about. So in all that, this is now my 7th month at Digitas. This is my first NewFront. I was curious what all the fuss was about, and I learned about that live today, being here in full to see this in glory. And what's amazing for me is all the energy in the room and passion that was brought to today. If this is my first NewFront, this is Digitas' 11th NewFront. 11 years putting on this forum. And Digitas has always been and is at the forefront of sponsoring the development of the digital content NewFront since it started. There's been a trailblazing company behind doing all that. And we're so proud of our affiliation with this content, with this storytelling, with the work we do to advance marketing and authentic marketing in the marketplace today. So there's so many people that were involved in pulling this together. I want to thank our sponsors and all the teammates that did this, all the folks that were involved with our NewFront team that brought this to life. Most importantly, I want to highlight 2 people that really brought this to light, which is Jill Kelly and Scott Donaton. And I want to call them both to come up on stage. I'm not going to kiss you. I just want to say that, if you're fortunate you work with amazing teammates, people that really are trying to make a difference and do something spectacular in all their day work, these are 2 people who do that all the time. And I think they organized an amazing forum today that was so relevant and timely and on point for all of us. So thank you. Thank you. So on behalf of them,
Yep, cocktail time?
yeah, on behalf of them and all of you, it's now cocktail time. We have 2 cocktails out there that are specially themed, #NotMyLemonade, and the least offensive mojito in the world. So please, thank you for coming, and we'll see you out for cocktails out there. Thank you.